If you're looking for the exact plan to photograph a wedding from start to finish, then this is the video for you, my friend. This is going to be a complete crash course built to get you through your first wedding. From pre-wedding prep to shooting the day to editing and finally delivering those photos. And if you're wondering who I am, my name is Ryan. I've been photographing weddings for over 10 years now, and in that time I've shot well over 100, maybe close to 200 weddings. I've pretty much made every mistake there is to make as I've been growing my own wedding business and learning this stuff along the way the hard way. So this is basically the shortcut, the dream guide that I wish that somebody had given me in the beginning. And I also want to give a quick thank you to Imagen AI for partnering with me on this video. If you want to give Imagen a try, you can use their link in the description below for 1,500 free edits, so you can actually test it on a full wedding for yourself. Now, before I jump into the actual wedding day and what that looks like, it's important we talk about what comes before the wedding. Here is my entire client workflow before the wedding day. We'll go through each step by step with my key tips and mistakes to actually avoid. Okay, so the client reaches out with their initial inquiry. Now, the key tip number one I have for you is have a redirect on your website. I have a redirect on my website, and basically what that means is once they submit their actual contact form, the website redirects them to a different page, and on that page, they can go ahead and through Calendly actually book a client call right away. Because I always want to meet the couple before the wedding day, so I know what their vibe is like, and we're not total strangers when I show up. Because one thing I've learned over the years is if I do not meet you ahead of the day, things are going to be really awkward for the first couple of hours. It's not a deal breaker, but I'm going to get way better photos if you actually feel comfortable with me in the room, and we're not just, like figuring this out on a first date kind of energy. So it also means that I actually book more clients because I'm not going back and forth with you trying to email 5,000 times to find a day and a time that works for both of us to actually connect. It's instant, it's automatic, and it's easy for the couple, so more often than not, they book the call. I'm much more likely to get that booking and make a connection, and so it's just the number one tip I can give you pre-wedding is have that call and have a redirect on your website so it happens automatically. Now the next step is the actual call, the client meeting. Now first off, do not spend the meeting asking them about the logistics of their wedding. Don't ask them about the timeline. The client meeting is first and foremost actually a vibe check for the couple. They've probably already stalked you on social media, they already know your work, they've already seen your photos, they just want to get to know and decide if they like you. Your goal is to connect with them. Figure out what makes them tick, what matters most on their wedding day, and if you feel like you really get them, and you're the kind of person that they actually want to be around on the wedding day, you're going to book more weddings. All the timeline stuff and the logistics, that's for after they book. But what I do want to ask them is what matters most to them as a couple when it comes to their photos. What is the one moment that you would really want to take and print on your wall? If you were to describe your wedding day, what is the one word that you would use to describe it looking back? What about my work actually stood out to you? What did you really love? And I'll take notes about all this stuff so that when the day is coming closer, I have it, I can remind myself of it, and I know what matters to them. And just in case you're curious about the numbers, about 9 out of 10 couples who inquire from my website will book a call. And about 90% of the time, if we do a call, they'll book. And that's because of 3 things, I think. First, I have my pricing on my website with a starting price so that they already have decided whether or not I'm in their budget and they're willing to pay that much. Second, I have lots of images and full weddings on my website, so it's very easy, as well as info about us, where they can read through who I am, my approach, what I prioritize, what the weddings actually look like, so there's all those questions have been answered in advance. They know what my style is and what they'll be walking away with. And third and finally, by the end of the call, they feel like I'm probably not a weirdo. Or if they think I am a weirdo, well, then maybe I'm their kind of weird. I'll probably be fun to hang out with on the wedding day. That's my goal, is that they walk away knowing that I genuinely care about them and truly understand what they want out of their day. Not just pretty photos, because so many photographers can do that. Now, those are my top tips for client calls. Once that call is done, I send over the contract and deposit info. And again, I'm covering this because you should never, ever show up to a wedding without a signed contract and honestly payment info. It protects you and it protects them. A contract spells out in writing exactly what both of you can expect from each other. And so it covers the worst case scenarios. If, God forbid, a camera gets stolen, or a guest trips on a light stand, or you're in a car accident on the way to the venue. These things happen. I've had a flat tire on the way to a wedding ceremony. Now, fortunately for you, there are lots of contract templates out there. Having a contract is better than no contract, and of course, I'm no lawyer, so this is a disclaimer right now that of course, I'm not giving you actual legal advice here, but personally, I always get a contract signed from the couple, and I take a $1,000 deposit to secure the date. And you can play around with that number depending on what you charge. I'd probably go with about 25% of whatever it is that you charge overall for the wedding day. And if you want some advice on pricing, if it's your first wedding, give the couple a great deal. Because that way, even if the worst possible thing happens, they still got a great deal. There's going to be a lot more grace there if things aren't perfect. Okay, so once I've got the deposit and the contract, generally I've got a few months now before I actually need to be in touch with the couple again about the timeline, about the logistics. And I don't do that up front because so many things can change between now and then. Like all the ideas and plans and whatever that they had, they are probably going to change 5 times. So I don't chat timelines closer than 6 weeks out from the wedding day because so much changes like this. But one thing that I would say, a piece of advice, is give your clients 2 example timelines early on. Say, hey, we're going to touch base about the details closer to the day, but here's one timeline with a first look, and here's one timeline without. And that way, when they are planning out their day, they'll be able to reference it and budget enough time for each portion based on what you need as the photographer. Okay? And if it's helpful, I do have a full 20-page plus bridal guide template that you can fill out. It's a Canva guide. You put in your own images, and then it will walk your couples through everything that they need to know, including, the stuff like what they need to plan for in timelines and stuff like that. Now, once the couple is booked, I'll send them some basic planning tips and set an alarm in my calendar for 6 weeks from their wedding day, and obviously for the wedding day also, to remind me when I need to get back in touch with them. So staying organized, that's one thing we need to talk about really briefly, is so important. I know there are different softwares out there like HoneyBook, stuff like that, but personally, I still just keep it simple and I use Google Calendar. Like I literally have a Google Calendar that says weddings for whatever the year is, and I will put everything to do with my photography bookings right in there. I'll put the couple's date in there and a 6-week reminder to remind me by notification and by email a day before and the day of the event because I will miss it otherwise. So when I get this reminder, let's go forward in time to 6 weeks out from the day and pick it up from there. Because what I'm going to do next is finally send the couple an email with 3 important things. First, I link to a questionnaire where they can actually enter all their info themselves about their wedding day. Now, I've built this questionnaire using Google Forms because I've just found it makes it super easy and reliable versus using a website contact form or something like that. I've tried it. Doesn't work so well because the last thing I want is for the couple to fill out a big form and it doesn't actually fill out properly or submit, or it only works on certain devices. It's just easier this way. And so in addition to getting the logistics of the day in that questionnaire, I also asked them inside of there for a list of family photos so that on the wedding day, we're not just winging that because again, if you do not have this stuff prepared in advance, on the wedding day, it's going to be a nightmare. It's going to be a mess, and everybody is hot and sweaty and frustrated and just wants to get a drink. I want to make that experience as quick and seamless as possible. And then the last thing inside that questionnaire is I will ask them a few questions about the important moments that they really want captured during each portion of the wedding day. So most of the time, these answers tend to be pretty generic, like we want photos of us kissing after we say I do. But once in a while, they'll actually share something that if I hadn't asked this, I would never have known or expected. For example, the bride might want to do a first look with her dad, or the groom is surprising his bride by singing her down the aisle. In both these cases, I was glad I actually had a heads up in advance so I could prepare for those moments. In addition to all this info, I'll also let the couple know in this email about their remaining payment and kindly request that they send it in the next week or 2. And I just tell them that's one less thing that they actually have to worry about in those few days before the wedding. And finally, I will ask them if they have somebody they know from the wedding who knows most of the most important family members there, who are going to be able to help me out as a group photo coordinator. And we'll talk more about that when we actually get into the group photos. Now that's pretty much it for 6 weeks out. They'll send me that questionnaire, I'll get the payment, I'll get their answers, and then I'll construct a timeline for their photography for them to approve. And that's a little bit different from what most photographers out there I know are doing, who ask their clients a lot less than I do before and kind of just show up on the wedding day. But I've honestly found that most of the time, clients don't have experience with getting married and with creating timelines. And so if I really want to make sure the day flows smooth by helping put something together that is going to work and save everybody on that day a ton of stress and energy. So my big tips for timelines is first, account for travel time and for time to actually find parking. You also want to make sure you build in some flex time between each part of the day just to give you some buffers for unexpected delays, because guaranteed on that wedding day something is going to go late. And when it comes to the morning preparations, I will always suggest to the bride that she gets her hair and makeup done first and then does touch-ups at the very end. This is very important because it makes sure that if the stylist is super slow and 2 hours behind because they've never done this before either, which does happen all the time, the bride isn't going to miss out on those important photos with mom and zipping up the dress and getting nice portraits. You don't want that. Trust me, it happens. So if you want to grab my actual client questionnaire, I've got it as a template on my shop at signatureedits.com, so I'll link to that too. And by the way, if you have timeline questions or questions about any part of the day as we go through this, please just leave them in the comments and I can definitely elaborate more. Okay, so once I've got the timeline nailed down, and I've got a family photo list, the next part of my prep is actually preparing myself with some inspo images from the venue and for the shots I want to prioritize during that day. Now, if I've never been to the venue before, I'll start by just Googling and see what's out there, what other photographers have done, the good angles. Typically, they've done a little bit of legwork and homework for me, and this is very, very helpful. I also want to look for things like where can I find parking? What's the parking like? And then I will look for some inspo photos from the venue's Instagram or from other blogs from other photographers so that I can kind of know what angles are going to be a starting point. And if it's possible to drop by, I really recommend trying to visit the spot in person too, especially at the same time of day that you'll actually be shooting there, because it's so easy to go there when the light is totally different, come back, and all the spots you picked out before don't work at all. So all these are things that I'm thinking out ahead of time, not dealing with it when I actually get there for the first time. Now, that is the kind of basic prep part, and then comes the fun and creative part of prep, which is prepping for my posing and my composition in advance. For me, I've shot hundreds of weddings now, so if I needed to, I could show up at any wedding, and I've already kind of got my go-to poses and lights and prompts in my back pocket. But if you are new to weddings, the more prepared you can be before the wedding day, the more successful you are going to be and the better of a time you're going to have. And for some reason, even years in, so many photographers I know still struggle with posing and figuring out what to do in the moment, when really it's not that complicated. And I will be honest, I still struggle on the wedding day if I haven't done my prep. So first, let's talk about the mistake I've made in the past that you might be tempted to make. I used to go through and I would create these big, massive inspo boards full of all the wedding photos that I loved and wanted to draw inspiration from. And this is what most photographers do. It makes sense, right? You want to have inspiration on the day. You don't want to draw a blank and not know what to do. Let's put a whole bunch of stuff in there. And the only problem is it actually doesn't work. Ever. Has been my experience. Now here's why. During the wedding day, what I found over and over and over the hard way is that you just do not have time to work like that. I would come to a wedding with 100 amazing ideas, only to find that 9 out of 10 of them just were impractical, or the lighting didn't make any sense, or the couple wasn't the right height, or something else. And so here's what I've learned. You can spend 10, 20, 100 hours scrolling through amazing wedding photos on Instagram or on Pinterest. That's not going to make you good at posing or taking wedding photos. Just like scrolling through 100 hours of bodybuilding content isn't going to give you chiseled abs. And if you truly want to nail your photos on the day, you've got to actually do the exercises, just like bodybuilding. So you've got to practice, and you've got to go deeper than just scrolling and hoping to be inspired. So here's my biggest tip for this. I think this is so important to actually photographing the wedding itself, is for each core part of the wedding day, find 3 or 4 kind of key photos, like the photos that if all you handed the couple at the end of the day were these few photos, they would still love what you gave them. And then I want you to take those 3 photos and study them the way you would study something if your life depended on it. You don't just need to know the gist of how to get these photos. You need to know every detail in this photo like the back of your hand. So take these photos and analyze the lighting, the framing, the lens choice, the camera settings, the background, the facial expressions, then break down the pose until you have every little detail figured out. And most people don't look this closely when they look at their inspo photos. And that's a mistake I've made in the past. And then you get into real life and you realize, oh shoot, I didn't actually pay attention to what they were doing with their hands or which way their feet were facing, right? So you need to know, how do their heads face? How about the angle in the neck? What are their shoulders doing? Is their head tilted? Are the shoulders back, or are they forward? What's their arm position like? The hand position. Is their arm up against their partner or slightly out to the side? Are the fingers straight or curled or out of view? If they're facing to the side, do you actually see both eyes, or do you only see one eye? And how much of each eye is visible? Are there catch lights in their eyes? Are their feet together, or are they standing with feet apart? Are the toes pointed straight or out? How are the knees? Are they bent or are they straight? Are they in motion or are they stationary? And that's just for the pose part. So you need to figure all of this out, because otherwise you just have the gist of the photo. You don't have the nuance, and if you don't have the details, it's going to feel off if you don't nail it, and it's going to take you way longer to figure this stuff out in real life. And so I'm saying all of this, and you're probably realizing that you might never have gone through a single photo this deeply before, which is exactly why when you try to recreate somebody else's photo in real life, it doesn't quite feel right. It's because it's taking you forever, it doesn't look the way it's supposed to, and it's like trying to cook a recipe that you've never tried before, but instead of having a list of ingredients and a process to follow, all you have is the picture, and you're just looking at it and trying to cook on the fly. And then you wonder why that recipe doesn't turn out, right? So your goal is to figure out your own recipes here before the wedding day, all the ingredients. And then you want to go a level deeper, and you want to think about the steps you have to take to combine those different ingredients to get to that end result. You want to step by step write down how you would need to get that shot. From selecting the location, to positioning the model, to directing them on how they stand and where to look, and the kind of things you'd have to say to actually bring that expression or emotion or moment into existence. That is the craft. That is the tricky part. And that honestly is your job security. That's the part that AI is not going to be able to replace. So you want to get really good at this. That's where the magic moments are made. Now, that is how you actually get amazing photographs and nail your first wedding. Not by spending hundreds of hours watching 30-second reels and just hoping that somebody else's talent is going to rub off on you. The best success and the greatest progress I've ever had as a photographer has come from this process of actually sitting down and figuring out the recipe and then committing that recipe to memory. So I'm not just looking at it on my phone on the fly. I have that thing like the back of my hand, and I'm going through it ahead of time so that once the wedding day comes, I don't freeze or panic or draw a blank. I know exactly what I want and what I need to do to get there. If you're a chef, you don't cook the recipe for the very first time on opening night at the restaurant, right? You cook those recipes over and over and over. You fine-tune it until everything is perfect and you're completely bored of cooking this thing and can't I just do something else before you actually serve that to a customer. And so you want to take that same mindset into your approach as a photographer. That's my advice. And if you do this, I can definitely guarantee you'll be ahead of like 90% of photographers, because for some weird reason, none of us actually do this. We all have ADD, we're creative spirits, we don't like being boxed in, we want to be improvising. And that's okay once you have the craft dialed in. That would be my encouragement for you. So find those 3 recipes for each part of the day. And what you'll find is that the first recipe you look at takes a lot of work, and so does the second. But each one of these recipes will give you a trick that can apply to another. And pretty soon you can actually mix and match. You've got a cookbook here, and you can create your own style and flair and approach to cooking when it comes to photography. And at your next wedding, you might throw a couple new ones into the mix to try that out, and a couple more the next time, until eventually it doesn't matter what situation comes up during the day or what unexpected thing is happening. You've got frameworks and recipes you can draw from to be able to figure out the solution, okay? So now we're going to talk about the one last thing when it comes to prep, which is your gear and camera settings. Now, I gotta be honest, I'd love to tell you that gear really doesn't matter. And if you know what to use and what you've got, you can still get amazing images. And that's kinda true. They did land a man on the moon with a less powerful computer than you can get with a dollar store calculator. But just because you can do something the hard way doesn't mean it's actually the best way, right? So let's chat gear. Now, personally, these days, I'm using the Sony a7 IV. This is an a7 III because the a7 IV is actually what's filming this video. This is my backup camera. I've been photographing weddings for 10 years now, and I've used all sorts of older, less fancier, less capable cameras than this, and they all work just fine. But a modern full-frame sensor camera, that's the key to make your job a lot easier and giving you more forgiveness when it comes to editing. So the brand name doesn't really matter these days. You can shoot Sony, you can shoot Canon, Nikon, Panasonic, they're all great. The real key is just getting that full frame sensor because it's going to be so much better in the low light parts of a wedding day. So interior ceremonies, receptions, the morning preps, all that stuff. So if you don't already own a camera like this one, I'd highly recommend renting one for a couple of days or borrowing one from a friend. If you're shooting the wedding for free already, you could always ask the couple. And odds are they probably would be willing to pay the rental for you. If you explain that, the photos they get will be way higher quality. So one important thing though, if you do rent a camera like this, don't rent it for just the wedding day. You want to make sure you get familiar with it ahead of time, so at least the day before, so you're not kind of panicking on the wedding day wondering how to access certain settings. So that's the camera. If you can, shoot full frame and something released in the last 5 years, and you're fine. Does this camera work good enough? Maybe. Is it a full frame, and was it released in the last 5 years? That would kind of be my guidelines for you. Now, let's chat lenses. I personally shoot 90% of every wedding with just this one lens. This beauty right here is the Sigma f2.0 to 2.8, 35 to 150. Now this thing is an absolute tank of a lens. It's amazing. The quality is superb. It's not light. You will be tired by the end of the day, but if you only have one lens to choose from, you can literally shoot an entire wedding, no problem, on this lens. Now, if you're looking for a budget lens option, my recommendation would probably be to go with something like a 35mm 1.8 prime and a 50mm 1.8 prime. Why those two lenses? Well, the 35 I find is not quite tight enough to cover things like the speeches and the ceremony, getting those core shots without being right up in people's face. So you want to have something like the 50mm. And the 50mm is not going to be wide enough to get absolutely everything. There's going to be moments in the day where it's just too tight to shoot with a 50. So between those two lenses, you can actually kind of cover the whole day. You're going to have to move around a bit more. You're going to get a little less variety, and you're going to be a little bit more up in people's faces. But you can definitely cover a wedding like that. Now, why did I suggest those lenses and not a 24-70 zoom or something like that? Well, the problem is with a 24-70, typically they're f2.8 or even higher, 3.5, depending on how much you've spent on that lens. And the problem with that is when you get to the darker parts of the day, you really need something like this lens that goes down to f2.0 at the very minimum. 1.8, 1.4, a lens that is a f1.2 is even better than that because it lets you lower your ISO. You're going to be way happier. Trust me, you want to get something that can shoot in low light and do it well. And finally, camera settings. I'm actually going to be super basic on this. I've used shutter priority. I've used aperture priority. And in the past, I've tried those things, but honestly, these days, I just stick my camera in full manual, and that's that. And I'll talk about the specifics of how I set each part of the day, but generally, my f-stop is stopped down just a little from whatever the max of this lens is. So if it's an f1.8, I'll put it down to f2. It'll be just a little bit sharper, the colors will be slightly better, and it'll have less issues if I stop it down just a little bit. Now, my shutter speed is generally as low as I can get away with for most of the wedding day. Why? Because the wedding day is typically dark a lot of the time. You're shooting morning preps, that's going to be dark. The ceremony, if it's indoors, is going to be dark. The reception is going to be dark. So most of the time, it's kind of what can I get away with? I would prefer to have my shutter speed at like 400 or 800. However, when you're inside, generally the rule of thumb is you want to set it to about 3 or 4 times whatever your lens focal length is. So if I'm in the middle of morning preps and I'm shooting that, and it's really, really dark in there, but I'm on a 50mm, the minimum I would shoot would be 150. If I switch to a 35mm lens, or I'm on my zoom and I zoom it out to 35, then I would be able to maybe get away with 1/100th of a second, okay? If I zoom all the way in to 150, I need to times that by 3, so I need a minimum shutter of about 450 in order for the lens to consistently produce a sharp image without a lot of motion blur. Okay, that's just a rule of thumb. If I can go higher, I definitely will. And lastly is ISO. Now, ISO is just going to be the makeup between my shutter and my aperture. If things are still too dark, I'm going to increase the ISO. If they are bright enough, then I'll lower the ISO and raise my shutter speed a little bit. Generally, the aperture just stays set. The shutter speed gets set to whatever the kind of best case scenario is, and then the ISO, if possible, is all the way down to like ISO 100. And if I need to, then I'll raise it up. However, I will say that on this camera, the A7 III, I probably wouldn't shoot above ISO 2000. ever. It's just gross. On the A7 IV, I'm happy with anything up to around ISO 1600. Anything above that, I actually find the colors are going to get really muddy and harder to edit. So in general, I will actually err more on the side of really cheating the shutter down and holding my camera really steady rather than raising the ISO whenever possible, because there's nothing worse than editing a high ISO photo that didn't need to be. Now you've ruined the colors and the skin tones just look horrible. That's my tip for you. You want to keep the ISO as low as you possibly can. It's going to make a massive difference in the colors of the photo, which is something a lot of people don't think about. They just think about the noise in the photo. It's not the noise, it's the actual loss of color information. So that's pretty much it. For the most part, I'll set my aperture and my shutter speed where they need to go, then I'll dial in the ISO up or down as I move around the room. Okay, so that's the camera and the lens. The only other core part of my setup, my polarizing filter. Okay, now this thing, it actually lives on my camera whenever possible when I'm outside, and it is a total and complete game changer. But it's true, it will change your life. I can't believe for the first 8 years of photography, I didn't actually use one of these because I didn't know they existed. It actually makes me angry at my younger self and at all of my friends for not telling me, Ryan, you need this thing in your life. Let me show you this. You might even see it if I hold it up to the camera. If I twist it back and forth, you're going to see it's actually changing the light that comes through the lens. It's basically sunglasses for your camera. It's a polarized filter, which means that it's taking all the directional light that is coming from different lighting sources, and it's cutting down the glare in your image from the harsh sun, and it's going to make all the colors much more vibrant and get rid of the kind of glary hotspots. And one of the most obvious things you will see immediately when you start using one of these is that the sky is going to be way, way, way darker and more blue. You're going to stop blowing out your sky, which I personally find amazing. So that's a $100 filter that I highly recommend. Mine is magnetic because I like that I can easily just pop it on and off, and I'll take it and I'll be a terrible person and I'll stick it in my pocket very carefully and just pull it out and put it back on the lens, because for me, I'm taking this on and off all day long. That's why I actually have a cheap one, because I like the fact that if it scratches and I drop it, it's not the worst thing in the world. I have tried a bunch of different brands out there, and personally, I have not noticed a big difference in quality, which is why for me, I stick with this. I have a couple of backups, so it's easy to switch and replace if I need to. And finally, my lighting. Let's talk lights, okay? This is a super complex topic. I don't want to overwhelm you. I've tried a ton of lighting setups over the years, everything from high-powered halogen bulbs on giant stands to spotlights to battery LEDs and every variety of course there is out there on flash setups, on and off camera flash. These days, I bring 4 lights to a wedding. I'm going to show you what I have, and then I'll tell you what I actually recommend as a beginner, okay? So I've got a couple of Yongnuo 564 flashes. They're super basic, just manual flashes that have a wireless function, okay? I've got a handheld video light. This goes on my camera, particularly for dance photos or for detail shots. It's just a little light I can hold while I'm also holding my camera. Very helpful. And then I have 2 larger LED lights. And these I'll talk about a little bit more later, but they are definitely just useful for lighting dances and also for lighting speech parts of the evening. And the reason I bring them is because I would rather the people in the wedding can actually see the speaker. Sometimes at cheaper venues, in particular, the lights are not very good. And that's the problem that a lot of photographers who are sharing their gear with you don't necessarily make clear is at this point in their career, they shoot really amazing weddings with high budgets. If you have a super cheap wedding at a very, very budget venue, typically the lighting is terrible. And so having different options just makes it a little bit easier to deal with certain situations, okay? But at the same time, you don't need to have all of this. And as a beginner, I probably wouldn't even advise it. It's a little like if you call a carpenter. They're going to bring a bunch of tools to your house. They have a whole truck full of tools for different things that might come up on the job. But that doesn't mean that you need to go out and buy every single one of the tools they own if you're just learning carpentry. You probably just need to buy a hammer and a drill and learn how to use those first. Now, having a good camera that can shoot at a higher ISO without a ton of noise, and a lens that can go down to f1.4 or 1.8 at the minimum f2.0 like you would get with this lens right here. That's the most important lighting gear advice I can possibly give you. Because most of the day, if I'm able to, I don't want to use my lighting gear. I actually want to use natural light because it's less distracting to guests and I can work more quickly and move around during the time that I have to get better results. Because there's nothing worse than having a bunch of gear that you're not really sure how to use and takes you forever to set up and take down, and it's just not worth it. You're going to get worse photos if you don't know how to use this than if you didn't have it at all. So during the rest of this video, I will show you more about how and when I'm using my lights, so you'll have a better idea of what might be right for you. But at the bare minimum, you probably are going to want to buy just a very basic flash so that you have something, worst case scenario, to light reception photos with in a pinch or bridal prep photos. But if at all possible, as a beginner, until you've practiced and you're really confident with this, I would not advise using it. I would use natural light and I would use a fast lens because you can mess up a photo far more quickly with flash than you can rescue it, okay? If you don't know what you're doing. So if you've got the budget, personally, I probably wouldn't go for this lens. I would actually go for the Godox V1. It's a solid mid-range flash and it's great because it also has a constant light built in, so it kind of does the job of this guy. So you can set it to constant light mode and use it as just a little bit of an extra light, or you can use it as a flash and it just lets you recharge it. It's great. It's a nice flash. Now, on the other hand, if you just want the most budget flash out there, I'd probably go with this. It's the Yongnuo 564. I have owned a couple of these for years and years and years. They don't have rechargeable batteries, but you can just buy some rechargeables and charge them yourself, and they're super solid. If you drop one, doesn't matter so much because they're built like tanks and they're cheap to replace, and I can buy two for the price of one Godox V1, which is nice because using a cheap Amazon flash trigger, I can actually put these wirelessly, and I can put them on a couple of light stands and walk around the room, and I know that my flashes, they're set up, they're not going to move, the lighting is consistent as I move around, which is really, really helpful. But honestly, for your first wedding, you do not want to be worrying about complicated stuff like this. You just want to go out, keep it simple, and master the basics, okay? And since we're already pulling out all of the camera gear, this is my camera bag. It's a Shimoda Action 25. I freaking love this bag. At first, I was kind of not super sold on it, but the more I use it, the more I love it. I've traveled all around the world with this bag, literally on dozens and dozens of flights, and it still is holding up like it was brand new. It has a camera cube that comes in and out, which is really nice, and this is where I keep my camera, which isn't in there right now. Some extra batteries. I have a lens blower and a lens sensor cleaner, so that's very helpful. And that's pretty much my entire kit, other than I do have a DJI Mini 3, which I'm using if I need a drone shot of the venue and it looks like it's worth it. I'll put that in there. It's super easy and simple. For my lights, I actually also have a couple of folding light stands. I will say that if you're using light stands, buy the kind that fold up smaller and extend to at least 7 or 8 feet tall. You don't want the shorter budget ones that also don't even compress as much. It's worth spending that money. One other thing you might want to add to your bag actually are these. These are clear umbrellas. Now, I would highly recommend, I keep 2 in my car. I almost never use them, but when it rains, it pours. So having a couple to offer the couple, and even if you have enough for the entire bridal party, that's great. But having just one umbrella is very, very helpful for your couple and one for yourself if it's pouring rain to keep you dry. And because it's clear, it makes for some great photos anyways. So I will make sure I put a full list of my gear, and if you have questions, ask them in the comments and I'll make sure to answer, okay? All right, that was a lot of prep. That was literally 36 minutes plus, and I hope that this was valuable for you, or you've just skipped to this part, which is the actual wedding day. We're going to go through every stage of the day now, step by step. I'll walk you through the big ideas, your must-get shots, and take you through my process so you can feel confident and also know what mistakes to watch out for. This is so important. Sweet, so with bride preps, my approach has shifted as I've gotten more experience as a photographer. So what I want to do is give you all the lessons and the mistakes I've made so you can basically skip all that stuff that I did wrong early on. Now, the biggest change in the way I used to shoot morning preps versus how I approach it now is that I used to spend almost all my time and energy on taking photos. Whereas now, I actually spend way, way less time on taking photos and more time on building rapport and getting to know everybody there, cleaning up the room, setting up the scene, and of course, actually keeping the day flowing so everything stays on time. And these all felt like really small details to me before, but people massively underestimate how much of a difference those little things actually make with the preps and how big of an impact it has, not just on the way your morning preps turn out, but also on the rest of your day when it comes to your photography. So I might seem like a little bit of an extrovert when you see me on camera, but in real life, I definitely don't feel super confident walking into a room full of strangers. And so in the past, I would actually walk in and I would say a really timid hello to whoever happened to be at the door and then just hide behind my camera and take photos of everybody. And this works great until you realize that the problem is if you walk into a room and just start pointing your camera at people, it's going to make it extremely awkward for everybody, yourself included. So cameras are intimidating for most people, and they don't know what to do. And so all of a sudden, they get really tense and stiff and unnatural, especially if they don't know who you are and you're in this small room where these intimate moments are happening. So nowadays, my approach is actually totally different. I'm actually going to start the day by walking into the room with my camera already out, just in case there's something magic going on that I want to capture. And the first thing that I'm going to do is actually just introduce myself to everybody who is in that room in like a friendly and confident and assertive way. And so it intimidates the heck out of me, I'm not going to lie, and I absolutely do not want to do it. But trust me, you want to say hello to everybody and just come across as a normal person. It's only awkward if you actually make it awkward. And it's honestly a little bit like you're jumping into a cold lake, right? There's this huge mental struggle that you have to overcome to actually jump. But once you leap, the rest of it is actually fine. Like, it's no big deal. It's easy from there. So look at it that way. You're probably not going to want to do it. It's going to make everything better. I promise you. So I'll say something like, hey guys, I'm Ryan. I'm the photographer. You're all looking super great. Who is everybody? And just by doing that, it's not even about what I said. It's just how I said it. It's the confidence and the smile on my face and kind of the fun, like I'm here to have a good time. I want to come across with that kind of energy, because the energy you put out into the room is going to reflect right back at you and back at your camera, okay? And so I ask who everybody is because, one, I want to know all the important people there. Like, who are the main characters that for the rest of the day I really want to focus on and watch? Second, I want to catch some names if I can. And third, I want people to feel like now we know each other a little bit, right? Like, after all, we're on a first name basis now. So that's it. The ice is broken. It's really not that hard, I promise. And this whole energy that you bring into the room is so important to the entire day. And so my advice to you is, before you actually step into the room and you knock on the door and you have to face strangers, what I want you to do is just think of how excited you'd be if on the other side of that door was a group of your favorite people who you haven't actually had the chance to see in years. Like, you're hanging out with these favorite people who get you, you can just be yourself. Like, that's the kind of energy and relaxed sort of confidence and just having fun with it that you want to bring into the rest of the day. And if you bring that and you bring that to people, they will reflect it back to you, whether it's in the morning preps or if it's during the photo shoot or if it's when you're bossing people around during family photos. Bring it with that kind of energy. Like, man, I just love these people, and they will reflect that back, and everything about your day will get way more awesome and way more easy. So after that, step 2 is generally just going to be asking about any details that actually need photographing. So I'll walk in and I'll say, hey, I'm Ryan, introduce myself, get everybody's names, and then I'll ask, hey, so where is the dress and the rings and the stationery, like anything you want a photo of, where is all that stuff? And so I'll make sure that I have all that stuff and I know where it is and I can take a couple of pictures. Now, here's something I think is super important that has definitely changed from the way I used to do morning preps. I have yet to meet a bride who hired her photographer because she saw an amazing photo of stationery. And she said, I have to have them for my wedding day. And generally, the photo of the cufflinks isn't going to be the photo that gets printed by the couple and hung on their wall in their home, right? So a big mistake I used to make was hyper-focusing on the detail shots of the dress and the shoes and the flowers and the cufflinks, when in reality, those things don't matter nearly as much to the couple as the real moments and the people that they actually have there gathered around them that they're sharing this day with, right? So absolutely, I get the photo of the dress. Go get the photo of the dress. But in my opinion, a photo of the bride carrying her dress is going to mean much more than the dress just hanging by itself in the doorway. Just like a photo of her carrying the flowers in one hand is going to mean much more than flowers on a table. And a close-up of the groom's boutonniere is actually going to be more if it's on him than if it's just sitting on the coffee table beside his tie and his shoes. So nowadays, where I can, I actually try to capture those details as much as I can as they show up in the actual story of the day, rather than just by themselves in kind of an abstract, random way. With that said, after I say hello and I have all the details, I'll generally still grab a couple of these safety shots, but I don't spend a ton of time here. I'm not spending an hour getting details. I will ask the bride in advance if a flat lay photo is important to her or not, because if it's not, I don't want to go ahead and spend time hidden away in a back room, missing real moments while I'm taking photos that she doesn't actually care about. So I make sure to clarify that and kind of prioritize where her priorities are. And after I grab those few shots, my next step is going to go and take a bunch of photos, right? No, it might have been in the past, but now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to look around the room. I'm going to look for great light, and I'm going to prep the room. The thing about prep photos is that if the room is trashed, which it normally is, and full of garbage and stuff in the background, which it normally is, and the lighting is awful, which it almost always is, the photos are all going to capture that forever. So if I go ahead and clean up the room, I'm going to figure out the best light, and I'm going to move furniture if I need to. Normally it's going to be the best light is near the biggest window, and then I'm going to have my back towards the window shooting towards where the light is going, and then I'll turn all the overhead lights off. And I do that because otherwise, very important tip here, I'm going to wind up editing nasty mixed light and color cast for hours and hours and hours, because one person is going to be under or near the light and they're going to be really yellow, and then the other person is going to be by the window and they'll be blue, and then there'll be a third person who's in the middle and is half yellow and half blue, and your life is just a nightmare. So I will generally go and I'll say, hey, I'm just going to shut off the overhead lights and we're going to use the window because it's going to look so much better for the photos. Is that okay with everybody? And then generally they all say, yeah, sounds good, and I shut them off and life is good. If you can address something rather than just do it in secret, you'll have way better luck. Trust me, make sure you just let people know, and it's generally no big deal. So I'll clean up, figure out where I'm standing and shooting from, and if necessary, I will move the couches over, or I'll take the TV off the wall, or whatever I can to make the background as nice as possible, because that's the easiest way to instantly improve my photos, is just finding a nice, clean background to shoot on and nice light that I can place people in. After that, I'll move the action so that it's happening where the light is happening. So if everybody's in the back of the room, which they normally are, I will get them to move up and by the window. And I used to be afraid to interrupt moments or ask people to move, but over the years, I've learned that generally people actually want guidance. They don't know what goes into taking photos, and they generally appreciate having somebody helping them look their best, right? Who wouldn't? And once they know what they're supposed to be doing, they're going to be much more confident anyways, because most of us are uncertain in front of a camera. So I will do that. And once that's taken care of, generally it's just going to be capturing things as they play out, while also kind of watching the clock and moving things along where they need to, because again, most of the time, these people haven't been to that many weddings compared to me, and they're all focused on a million different things in their heads, and so it's really easy to lose track of time. So I want to help with that where I can, and in between, I'll do some visiting and getting to know people and having some fun conversation, because again, every time you have the chance to build some rapport, it just is going to help people get more comfortable and used to me hanging around. And all that's left is really those core shots that I've already memorized and prepared for in advance. And so here's a trick that really works well for me. Rather than trying to get super scripted poses, especially of groups, I generally try to actually think of moments and activities I can get them to do that will naturally make for amazing photos anyways. So for example, one of my favorites with the dudes is that I will actually have all the groomsmen pretend like he's the star quarterback of their favorite team and he just single-handedly won the Super Bowl. So I want them to grab him, pick him up, go absolutely crazy. Okay, sound good? And then I'll count down from 3. The guys will be on either side. The groom will be looking straight at me. And then we get these absolutely amazing and hilarious reactions and laughs and genuinely candid expressions, because even though the situation I set up was 100% artificial, the moment inside of that was real because they were interacting and doing something. And so it's way, way more fun than if I just said, hey guys, look at me and smile like you're super pumped. Does not come across in the same genuine way. So I talked about all this in the pre-wedding stage, but I love looking at amazing photos and reverse engineering this stuff. Like, what could I say? What moment might have led to this moment? Because that is how you can create these kind of real candid moments almost on demand by setting up these kind of situations where people are being genuine. And then I'll test a few of these kind of ideas and prompts, and one might fall flat and another might just be okay. And then I'll hit one, it's like, that was gold. And then the next wedding, I can take that gold one and get rid of the other 2 and maybe try 2 new ones. And so over time, you wind up finding these different techniques to get those amazing expressions and create those amazing moments. So for groups, getting people out of their awkward around the camera vibes, setting up moments and kind of activities like this can definitely be really, really helpful versus trying to get people posed and, the perfect expression. And the last big thing I do want to mention that I've learned over the years is that one of the few photos you really do want to make sure you both prepare for and absolutely get is at least one amazing portrait of the bride and one amazing portrait of the groom just by themselves. And this is something you want to make sure you come prepared for, because you probably won't have more than a couple minutes to take it, because it's one of those few core shots that actually you're not going to get ever. It's never going to just happen. So you have to actually step in and make it happen. But the great part is, if you've gotten everybody used to you being around and they're having fun and they're relaxed and they kind of trust you a bit more, then it's going to be so much easier by the time you actually take this portrait. Way easier, because the body language and their expressions will just be natural. I think that's generally a pretty good overview of my approach to morning preps, and it really is about getting people comfortable, setting up great light, and then being more intentional and prepared in what you're shooting. Because at the end of the day, you don't need 500 photos of the prep, especially 500 mediocre ones. You want to get those 15, maybe 20 max really great shots, and inside of that, maybe 3 to 5 amazing shots that tell the story and capture all the main characters there, and get to know those main characters really yourself, so that during the rest of the day they're able to drop their guard and just be their natural selves around you. So now let's move on into the next part of the day, which is the first look. First looks are simple, but they're also kind of complicated. So this is a trick to getting those amazing photos that you see on Instagram. And I'll give you a hint. It's not because those photographers that you see are just super lucky and things unfold precisely the way they were meant to around them. It's actually from a little thing I call sequencing. So if I show you pretty much any big emotional scene in any movie, you'll see there is always a similar pattern. First, the shots start out wider and farther apart, and then they get intentionally closer and closer, and they make you feel like it's getting more and more intimate. Second, the lighting, the music, the colors, the environment, everything in that scene actually supports the emotions in that moment. And third, the actual characters show it on their face. You can see their emotions. And so all these elements come together to create an amazing scene. And that's what we want to do inside of our first look by setting these things up intentionally. So when I say sequencing, my biggest advice for you is to dissect some of the first looks you've seen out there. Look at those photos and actually study what's going on in all these different elements in the actual background and the setting and the emotions on the characters' faces and the lighting. Like, look at all these things, and then you can reverse engineer all those little pieces that make these photos so amazing. So I'm going to give you my go-to 3-step plan to setting up first looks that I developed that, for me at least, works and make sure I can get these moments up way more consistently. Step 1 is just setting up the scene, defining the location and finding the best possible light. Now, most of the time, this is something you'll have limited control over because you can't always change where the first look happens, but you can always change the direction that you're facing and taking photos from. So in general, weddings, we all know, happen at the worst time of day, and the lighting is almost always terrible. So here's what I almost always do. I will figure out my lighting first. I'll look at the scene, what I have to work with, and say, okay, what direction is going to be the most flattering light? So if I can, I look for the direction that they're going to be more shaded. So if there's some open shade and we can walk over to there, that's where I'm going to put them. Open shade is basically anywhere that is totally shaded on them, but is not in the shade, like under a tree. So open shade would be behind a building, for example, where they're not actually covered, but they're not in the direct sun. You're going to get way softer light, which means you can actually move around, take different angles, and not worry about one of them being blown out and the other one is in the shade or has squinty raccoon eyes. Now remember, these photos that you set up of the first look are way more about the moment than the background. And so it's more important that you find great light and that they look great, even if it means going behind a building versus having a great view of the lake. If they look great and you capture those emotions, that's what they're really looking for. It doesn't matter that the background isn't super interesting. Now, once you've found great light, you want to face in the direction with the most beautiful background that you have access to. So preferably a darker background will give more contrast to the couple, or a background that is a little bit farther away will have a little bit more depth, or a background that is more plain and simple will be much less distracting than one that has a whole bunch going on in the back. So we just want a background that supports the moment. And if all else fails and you really have no options here to get out of the sun, what I would do is just point my camera in the direction of the sun and have the couple basically in between me and the sun. That way, everything I see is going to be evenly lit because it will still be in the shade, and at least they won't have those raccoon eyes under, and if they are facing towards me, they're not going to be squinting. This is kind of the closest thing to finding open shade that you can get in those sort of all-sun environments. So, step 2, after you've set up that scene, is actually getting the characters in place. So at this point, setting up and finding the light, I try to do that before the couple is standing there. I'll go ahead by a couple of minutes if I can and set all this up and figure it out, because the last thing I want is for them to be sitting around getting annoyed as they're waiting for me to figure this stuff out, especially if it's hot outside. So after I've got it figured out, then I'll get them and I'll actually tell them where they need to stand and what they need to do, which is something that most photographers don't actually do when they're starting out. They feel like first looks should just happen naturally, and so they say, okay, have your first look, and they just hope for the best. I will actually direct my clients and tell them exactly how this is going to go. And you might be saying, well, Ryan, that's super fake. Don't they hate that? Like, how do you get their real reactions then? My friend, you're asking great questions. So I don't make the whole thing fake. I just lay out the game plan for them so they know exactly what to do, what to expect from me, and what's going to happen. And as it turns out, couples actually appreciate that because it makes it so I can be less up and in their face and distracting when that moment comes. Because as I tell them, I'm going to take a few photos now of each of you individually, and we're kind of do this step by step so that I can get what I need, and then I can just step back and let you guys have your moment and do your thing. And that's exactly what I do. And this is where the actual sequencing comes in, the step-by-step photographs of the scene. So if you picture this like a movie scene, shot number 1 is a wide shot that I'll get with both of them not facing each other. So the bride might be facing the groom, and it's a nice wide location shot. Shot number 2 is over his shoulder of her. So he's in the foreground, he's nice and blurry, and I'm looking back towards her. Then I will pause the action and say, hey, stop right there. Shot number 3 is going to be a shot of both of them, but just closer, a little bit tighter, maybe a full body shot, portrait, but it's zooming in. We're getting more and more intimate, right? We're building the emotion. And I actually make them pause at this point, and I get these shots. It might take me 30 seconds to a minute. Like it's pretty quick. I'm not spending 10 minutes doing this, but it actually works just fine because it's also helping do the same thing that great music does in these romantic love scenes. It's actually kind of like building up the tension in that moment because she is right there, but he can't see her. He can hear her voice, he has no idea what she looks like, and he is right there, but she doesn't know how he's going to react. So the emotions are actually building as that's happening. And I might even tell a little joke and say something like, oh man, I bet this is killing you to sit here when she's just inches away. You're going to lose it. She looks freaking amazing. And you know what? I was skeptical of those polka dots, but I really think that dress does work for you. And so we'll get a laugh out of the groom, we'll get a laugh out of the bride, and I'll get these candid shots, right? And so I'll almost always get some amazing smiles and laughs and loosen them up while also tightening them up at the same time. And so I need those emotions to actually be at peak before he turns around. Because if they're not, if I don't wire him up a little bit and kind of like hype this moment, then they probably won't show up on camera. Because contrary to what you see on the Instagram, 99% of grooms, when they turn around, like they're feeling a lot, but their face doesn't actually show it much at all when they see their girl. And so at this point, I'll try and hype them up, and I'll get into a position where I know I'm now going to have an amazing shot of the groom when he turns around. This is so key. I have made this mistake before where I'm facing the groom and I'm looking at his face, and then he turns around and I realize, oh shoot, now I can't see his face at all. I only see the bride. And the best moment is gone. And I know you are smarter than me. You would never make that mistake, but I will just say, in general, if it's only you there, you want to go and be kind of facing them sideways so that you can see both of their faces, both his reaction, which is what you're going to focus on, and her reaction to his reaction after she sees him react. And if you have two photographers, I would have one getting the side view and then one getting close up specifically just of him and his face as he turns around. And that's it. Those are the 3 shots. And now we let the magic unfold. And so I'll say, okay, do you want to have him turn around and walk up to you? Or do you want to go up to him and put your hands around his eyes or spin him around? And so I'll let them choose whatever it is they want. And then I get out of the way and I just let that moment happen. And that's step 3. You let it happen. You put burst mode on your camera and he's turning around and you want to get all those photos. You want to take like 20 because chances are there's going to be like 1 microsecond that looks amazing and the rest of them just look like really silly because they're in mid-expression. And then you want to move around and get different angles. But most of the time at this point, I generally want to not be distracting or too in their face. So it's almost all going to be using a longer zoom lens, like my 35-150, to kind of minimize the amount of noise that I'm making in the background so that they can really focus and just have this sweet moment for themselves. And so that basically is it. Once it feels like things are calming down, then I'll step in and I'll tell them how amazing that was and how great they look together. And I want to keep them kind of feeling amazing, right? So I'll hype them up and I'll be pumped on this. Like, oh my gosh, guys, that was freaking amazing. You guys are the best couple ever. And then while they're still feeling all these emotions, I'll try and get some more intimate portraits and kind of get some of those more organic moments on the fly. So put your head on his shoulder, snuggle her in real close, wrap your arms around each other, go forehead to forehead, that kind of thing. Then I'll make a joke probably like, can you still feel that nervous sweat on his forehead? And then you cue the laughs in the genuine moment, and it's 100% real. But also 100% would never have happened if you didn't actually create it. And so that's what I'm hoping you're getting out of this, and what I wanted to communicate, that is like the nuance that you would never pick up by just watching the kind of over the shoulder view of me, is why I'm doing the things I do and why I crack the jokes I crack. It's because I want to get those reactions to what I'm saying more than actually like just say something stupid for the sake of being dumb. And that's the needle you've got to thread. And I get it. Some people don't have the easiest time just spontaneously thinking of things to make people laugh, but it really doesn't take that much. So the biggest thing is just making them feel amazing and complimenting them, and then having a couple of these like tiny little jokes in your back pocket that you can whip out. And that's literally how you nail pretty much every first look ever. The key is just setting it up like this so you have good light, so that you actually take the moment step by step and do that sequence, because if you don't, I can't tell you how many times it just happens, and it happens way too fast and you miss it, or it doesn't happen in the right way, and it just winds up being complete chaos because I didn't set the scene and I didn't lay things out and I didn't pause the action to make sure that everything was ready before I was in position. So that's it for the first look. This took me a long time to figure out, and if you follow this guide, you will be miles ahead of where I started. Now, we're just about to head into the ceremony here, but really quickly, I want to thank Imagen AI for making this video possible in the first place. I've been using Imagen AI for around 2 years now, and I've used it on every engagement or portrait or commercial or wedding shoot that I have done, and it saves me a ton of time in my editing workflow. Basically, it gets my photos 50 to 75% of the way there before I even open up Lightroom by looking at my past sessions and dynamically adjusting every single photo based on the lighting and the circumstances and what it knows about my style. So if that sounds interesting to you, actually cutting down your workflow so you can focus more on your business instead of in your business, they've added a link in the description below that is good for 1,500 free edits. So you can try it for yourself and really see whether this is something that you're going to use as a tool or not by clicking that link in the description, sign up, get your 1,500 free edits, and basically edit your first 1 or 2 weddings for free, or 10 plus portrait shoots. But either way, give it a try, see how it works, and thank you, Imagen, for making this video possible. So I want to break the ceremony down step by step, because for a lot of you watching this, this is the single most high pressure situation you're going to face during the wedding day, and you really want a roadmap for where to stand and what to do and what shots you need. Now, I've photographed well over 100 weddings at this point, and after a while you start realizing something. There really just aren't that many photos that you truly need on a wedding day, which is good, because what I find makes the biggest difference in improving my own photos is less frantic photo taking and more energy and time spent getting that handful of truly amazing shots during each part of the day. Now, don't get me wrong, I still shoot a couple thousand images on a wedding day, and particularly on the ceremony and the live parts that I can't get back and only get one shot at, I'm going to take a lot more. But I'm also aware in the back of my mind that I'm not trying to give the couple 500 photos from their ceremony. In fact, they don't actually want that. Most couples really only want maybe like a dozen really truly amazing, heartwarming, beautiful photos from their ceremony that they can share on Instagram. And of course, I'm going to give them a lot more, but I really want to make sure that I define the most important shots so that I know what to prioritize and that I put more energy into those rather than getting a bunch of average ones. So let's break down how I actually shoot the ceremony by breaking it down into 7 key kind of scenes: the setup, the entrance, the handoff, the vows, the signing, the kiss, and the exit. So we're going to go through each of these, and I'll walk you through where I would stand, what I would do, whether it's with one shooter or with 2 photographers. Now, scene 1 is the setup, the intro, everything that is happening before the VIPs arrive and the actual ceremony itself. So we establish the location, we show the details, we grab shots of people arriving and visiting and smiling and mingling. And remember, almost everybody there, every guest, is special to the bride and groom in some way. So my goal at every wedding is to get a great photo of every single person. I want to make sure that I treat everybody there like a VIP. And so you know how to get those photos of people smiling and laughing and interacting? The same way you do it in the morning. If the situation makes sense, I'll actually take a second when I get to the ceremony location before anything is starting out, and I'll introduce myself to the different groups who are kind of mingling around. And as people are milling about, I'll say, "Hey guys, I'm the photographer. You're looking amazing. Can I get a quick photo?" And they'll put their arms around each other and they'll say, sure, they'll smile, and like just like that. It's easy, it's simple, and the couple is going to appreciate that photo. Now, you want to go up to people, you just say hello. You ask them how they're doing, and I promise you, they will literally rave about how amazing you are and how every interaction you have for the rest of the day will totally change. In doing that, I'm also making my way around. It's key I introduce myself to the other vendors, the planner, the DJ if they're there, the officiant. I want to make sure that I'm speaking to all of them, just, got good energy, and I'm doing what I can to help them out. It's super important that I check in specifically with the officiant and I ask them about their plan for the ceremony so that I'm not caught by surprise because for some reason they decided to do something like, have the groom walk in from the side instead before on the aisle, or do the kiss before the signing of the registry, or maybe the groom is riding in on a horse, right? Like this has actually happened, and if you don't know about it, you're going to be in trouble. I want to know that. And I also want to know if it's a religious venue, if there's anything that I need to be watching for, whether it's part of the ceremony that I don't know about, or whether it's places that I can't stand, or flash I can't use, or times I'm not supposed to take photos, right? All this stuff is things I want to know. And of course, I'm asking that in my questionnaire, but the clients don't always mention the fact that the groom is riding in on a horse. So that's the setup. I will make sure to grab a water, I'll go to the bathroom, I'll stay hydrated, I'll eat a little snack that I've brought because after the ceremony starts, I know there's a good chance I won't be able to actually stop again or take a break until the reception. That leads us to scene 2, which is the entrance. So either you are a solo photographer or you have a second shooter. Now, honestly, for me, if it's your first ever wedding, I'd probably recommend actually going onto Facebook, finding a photographers group in your city, and hiring or just having for free a second photographer, literally just for the ceremony part of the day, because having some backup here is always nice. Let's go through exactly how everything unfolds and where you'll stand step by step in both situations, whether you're by yourself or you have 2 photographers. Now, the primary photographer position is always going to be the exact same, no matter if it's just you or it's a second photographer. This is the officiant, this is the wedding ceremony, and this, my friends, is you, okay? You are the photographer, and here is the groom. He's standing up front at the right-hand side. Now, you're always going to park yourself here as the first photographer because this gives you a clear view and a clear shot of the groom. It also gives you a clear view shooting up the aisle, and if you park yourself right beside mom or whoever's standing there, you aren't in anybody's way and blocking their view too much. Of course, they're all going to be facing the other way, so I'd more stand back here. And you just want to make sure you're not blocking anybody. As the bridesmaids are coming down the aisle, you want to make sure they still have room to go and stand where they need to stand. Obviously, in this example, it's a pretty tight space, so I might actually move up somewhere more like this and crouch down a little bit, or I would actually probably wind up standing more here by the officiant as people are walking in, and then as the bride's about to get down the aisle, that's when I would move my position, obviously. Okay, so you're going to be somewhere on this side so you can have a shot of the groom and down the aisle. All right. Now, where do you put a second shooter? Well, there are a couple different options. The first option would be putting them here as kind of a secondary angle / safety shot. Now, the reason that I would put them here would be they can get a nice, clear, safe shot as everyone's walking down the aisle. And once they get one of these people in focus, they're going to be in focus the entire way down. So that's why it's a safe shot and a bit of a different angle to add some context and some extra story. Or they can also be over here at the end of the aisle on the same side as you. And that way, if there's something nice down here, a nice background, they can get another different walking shot down the aisle. They can also get over the shoulder towards the groom, and it kind of just gives them an extra option. Now, you don't want them to be on the opposite side of the aisle from you. The reason is you'll be in their shot and they will be in your shot. So you want to be on the same side of the aisle, whichever side that winds up being. Traditionally, the groom is always on the right. However, talk to the officiant because sometimes she'll put him on the left for some reason. So just make sure you know, and that's fine, okay? Now, let's talk about the other 2 people who might be present with you, which is your videographers, okay? So generally, what I like to do during the pre-ceremony portion of the day is introduce myself and say, hey, let's come up with a game plan of where we're going to stand. What do you normally like to have happen? I typically stand up near the front of the aisle. Would that work for you to kind of pair up with me and my second photographer? And so we'll just talk through it. Generally, I would have my videographer and myself stand by each other. That way we're not in each other's shots and we'd be on the same side of the aisle. Now, sometimes they will want to be on the total opposite side and life just becomes a little more awkward because I can either choose to be beside them or they get in my shot. If this were the case, I would probably then put my second shooter over here so that she can take a nice shot this way and the videographer is not in that shot. So this is why I'm going through these. There's a lot of nuance just depending on what kind of pops up during the day. Obviously, if you don't have videographers, life is a lot easier. That said, videographers are good. I used to be one. I hear you. You have struggles of your own. Now, the second videographer may or may not go here or here or here. So you just try and have better communication and come up with a plan ahead of time and explain to them, hey, this is actually going to be a little challenging for me. Is there any wiggle room? Could I maybe get you to move over here instead? And generally, people like to help each other out if you come at it with that kind of an attitude and you communicate what you need and you ask nicely. If you are combative, if you don't ask for what you need, if you don't communicate, well, then you can't be surprised when you don't get what you want. So that would be my one piece of advice when it comes to ceremonies in general. I will actually move the carpet. I will move the entire ceremony over if I have time and all the chairs are not centered on the archway. Those things happen, and it's up to me to take control of the circumstance, not to let the circumstance happen to me. Obviously, I'm going to make the day better. I'm never going to make it just be about my way over what anybody else wants. I'm just trying to serve the couple and get the best possible photos possible and help everybody have the easiest time they can with their job. So I'm going to do that in whatever way I can and take initiative and not be afraid to ask when I need something. So with that said, let's talk through the rest of this ceremony. Everybody's walking down the aisle. We got groomsman number 1. He goes over here. Groomsman number 2. He goes over here. Now, while this is happening, you're obviously getting photos of the groomsmen. You're going to get the odd photo of the groom. One thing that a lot of people forget is taking photos of the front row of guests on both sides of the aisle. The reason is these people are the VIPs. They're the parents, the grandparents, the siblings. We want a photo of them, and now is your only chance to get it, because once you've got people standing in front, the bridesmaids and the groomsmen, you can no longer go and get that photo. You're now way too tight, and it's impossible to see past their shoulder and get everybody in there. So that'll be a piece of advice even before the ceremony starts. Just get everybody to look at you and get a photo on both ends of this aisle, if you can, if you have some time, or do it during the ceremony, okay? So everybody's walking in. The bridesmaids walk in, and you're going to have to shift your position a little bit as they move in, especially in a ceremony site like this, which is pretty tight, and there's not a lot of room for everybody to stand. I probably stand somewhere like this, so I'm not cutting off anybody's view or cutting off their ability to walk where they need to walk. And then finally, we're going to get to the point where the bride is actually at the top of the aisle, and this groomsman is going to become the dad for the purpose of this demonstration. And now we need to get our second photographer to move. In general, me and my videographer buddy are still going to be in the same spot, but the photographer needs to move. And if this is you and you're over here, you need to move, because what's going to happen next is everybody is going to rise for the bride. And if you're standing here and everybody rises, you won't have any view. So generally, here's what I'd have a second do. I would have them come to the same side of the aisle as me, and then they get a nice shot at the end of the aisle, so they can get the sideways shot from here as bride and dad are stopping at the top of the aisle. And then she can move in, making sure she's not getting into my shot in behind. And as they're walking down the aisle, when they get to maybe around here, at this point, it's pretty tight for me to shoot them. I've probably got what I need. So I'd get the second photographer, if I trust them, to come up in behind and get an over-the-shoulder view of her shoulder, his expression. Okay, so I'm watching the groom at this point as she's getting closer down the aisle, and then my second photographer can get the view over the shoulder of the groom, and that's just a really nice shot. She's also walking up the aisle for the second reason, which is as the bride gets to the top of the aisle, we now have the exchange. So the groom is going to take the bride from dad and maybe from mom as well. So she'll get handed off, and there's going to be a hug on both sides. Everybody's loving each other. And so this is very important. You're going to get really stuck if you, 1, have a zoom lens, and 2, haven't moved back somewhere. And in a situation like this where it's really, really tight, honestly, I would probably back up beside the officiant here. And so depending on the situation, depending on the context, this might change a little bit. It's just that you need to be able to be aware that this scene is about to happen. And if you're not aware of the scene, you're going to get caught too up close and personal, and you can't get the shot. And so that's where having the second photographer here is also helpful, because if you back up to, say, over here or over here, and you just can't get the shot, the second photographer can get a nice view of this exchange as it's happening, okay? So after the handoff, generally, the bride is going to be here, the groom is going to be here, mom and dad are going to go take their seats, and then the ceremony is going to start, right? So I'm going to get out of the way, I'm going to back up, and then we've finished the intro scene, the basically entrance of our ceremony. Once the handoff happens, you generally have a couple of minutes here before the celebrant actually gets into the vows because they're welcoming people, they're saying a few words, stuff like that. But first off, during that first 30 seconds after the handoff and the hugs have happened, when mom and dad have sat down, you want to be watching like a hawk to get photos of them and any of the other main characters who teared up during the ceremony. And that's my one big piece of advice here that so many new photographers get stuck in, is they're hyper fixated on the bride and the groom. Remember, they're the most important characters, but they're not the only characters in this scene. We also want to be watching the people, particularly on the front row. You're already standing awkwardly in the front, so now is the best view you're ever going to get, and you won't disturb things nearly as much as trying to go up to the front in the future to take that photo later. And emotions tend to be running at their absolute highest, which is what makes for the most super touching photos. So one of the biggest tips I can give you during the ceremony is awareness. You've got to be watching and looking around like every 10 to 20 seconds. Is mom crying? Is the flower girl off to the side playing with her basket? Is your second shooter or the videographer trying to get a shot and you're blocking their view? So just keep your eyes up and always be kind of looking around. Now, after the handoff, generally, this lull is where I'll head to the back of the room and I'll actually get a wide shot. So I'll get my wide shot, I'll back up, and a wide shot would typically be like me way down here actually, trying to get everything and get a few different angles and compositions. And so this is my one chance where there's a lull, there's not really anything that anybody needs to capture. And so if there's a videographer there, I'll have chatted with him or her about this ahead of time, and we'll both get our wide shot at the same time, so we can both move back in, he can set his tripod up again, and it won't be in each other's way. After that, I'm going to come back up and I'll probably get some different detail shots, and my second photographer at this point I will generally have just looking for reactions and also watching the main action while I'm getting this wide shot. Okay, the better you communicate and plan with the videographer and with your second shooter, the more likely you'll both get along. So some old school videographers, they won't get completely out of the way for your wide shot. If that's the case, fair enough, I'm not going to fight them on it. They're just doing their job, so I'll Photoshop them out of those couple of photos that I actually have to Photoshop them out of, so it's fine. I'll grab a few angles, a portrait, a landscape, and in a perfect world, I've actually already tested my angles before the ceremony is started so that I know where I need to go and kind of what lens I'm using, so I don't need a lot of time to experiment and figure out what looks good. This way I can get back into the action and not actually miss any of the candid moments because I'm off trying to get a wide photo. Okay, and I'm not forcing the videographer or the second photographer to sit around waiting for me. That's the key. We want to remember that the ceremony is a team sport. There's a few different moving pieces here, and we want to make sure everyone works together. I'll be grabbing mostly candids of guests while the officiant is kind of doing her little thing. And I'll be watching the wedding party, the guests. I'll get a shot of the bridesmaids. I'll get a shot of the groomsmen, get a shot of the couple. Watch for laughs, those kind of candid moments up until the vows get started. Remember, all this might only be for a couple of minutes, so for a religious ceremony, maybe you actually have longer, and if that's the case, then there might be some readings or music or other things that, of course, we're going to photograph too. And if it's just me, I'll cover the main action of whatever is actually going on and sneak reactions and candids where I can. If I have the second photographer, I will get them grabbing candids and reactions while I get the person who's doing the speech or the reading or whatever it is. All right, so eventually the vows actually start, and this is where the more core part of the key shots are that we need to get, because this is the high emotion moments, right? So really, there is just a couple of key photos I actually want from this part of the ceremony, and then the rest is just bonus. The tricky part, though, is not actually getting the angle, it's getting the angle at the absolute perfect moment. So that little microsecond when that person happens to just smile or laugh or look up from their notes at their partner, and that's the biggest skill here, is finding your angle and then literally sitting there with your finger just half pressed on the shutter, just waiting for that microsecond to happen. That's my biggest tip. I would shoot, not in high burst mode, but definitely in like medium burst mode, so that when you take that photo, you take a couple and you get a couple options of that laugh or of that expression. That's my biggest tip there, is just be ready, be watching, because it's those tiny little in-between moments that tend to make for the best photos. So the first key shot I want to get is one great photo of them both together, medium wide. So basically a full body shot where I can see them from head to toe. And I'll probably be somewhere around here on the aisle, or if the light was really bad in this direction, I might go around and in the back if I could get there without distracting people too much. The key is I want it to be wide enough that I can actually print it, or I could cover an album page with it, but also close enough that I can see their expressions. The key is you don't want to go so wide that you can't see people's smiles or see their tears down their eyes. We want to be able to conserve that emotion, okay? Now, Preferably, their face is actually doing something in this moment. They're smiling, they're laughing, they're crying, or all three together. So once I've got an angle that I really like, I'm going to sit there and not just take one photo, I'll probably take 20. So I have different options and I'm watching for those different micro moments. As far as camera settings, most of the wedding ceremony, I'm in medium burst mode. I don't want to take so many photos that my card is getting unnecessarily clogged up and slowing down, but I do want to take multiple photos that I have options during these little micro moments. They're so quick that I want to have a couple, okay? Second key shot is I want individual portraits of each of them. Now, in this particular ceremony, it would be very tricky for me to go to each side of the aisle and get a photo of the groom and of the bride from here because they'd just be covered up by their groomsmen and their bridesmaids. So I probably would go to each side of the aisle like this and get a photo of the groom and a photo of the bride. Again, I might be up near the top with a 35mm. That would allow me to get a full body shot of each of them and also maybe some kind of medium body shots also. In the past, I have done it with a 7200 from over here. The problem is it's almost going to be impossible to get a full body shot that way. And in general, I will say that erring on the side of going wider tends to work better. The reason is you can always crop in a little bit and zoom in and get that close up. You can never crop out. Stick to slightly wider if you can. And in this situation, I'd probably go here. If you need to go around to the other side of the aisle, one piece of advice, always go around from the back if you can. It's going to be a lot less distracting. In fact, I would actually rather do one of these and go behind everybody than I would cross in front of the action because I find that is just a lot more distracting, okay? In a pinch, I will do what I have to if I have no other option, but my goal is always to be as invisible as I physically can while still getting amazing photos. Now, the tricky part of this whole thing is actually deciding which side you should be photographing when. Do you shoot towards the person who is reading their vows or towards the person who is receiving their vows? And you kind of have to gauge this based on who's who and how they're reacting, but in my experience, if it's just you and you're the only photographer and you can't have one of you on both sides of the aisle, well then it's generally better to shoot towards the person who is receiving their vows than giving them. And that's because the person who is reading their vows 75% of the time is looking at an ugly piece of paper or at their phone, and they tend to look like this most of the time as they're reading their vows. They're just staring down at their paper. There's not going to be many photos there. Whereas the person receiving their vows is much more likely to be looking at their partner and reacting a little bit more. So as a rule, if you have to choose, that's kind of the way I would go. But it's challenging to give you a one-size-fits-all guide for this part because every ceremony is different, every venue is different, and you kind of got to gauge it by the day a little bit and by the room and by the size of the wedding. So if it's an elopement in an outdoor space and it's no big deal for me to be moving around here, well, then I go to both sides as they're doing their vows, right? Because there's not that many people and it's easy for me to just hop around and move wherever I need to move. Whereas if it's a big formal ceremony, I have to be very careful. I might not even be able to cross without a 5-minute journey. So I just need to be very cognizant of making that decision and being conscious. So it really depends. There are different approaches. Some photographers literally will get right up in everybody's business and they will shoot on a 50mm for the entire wedding, and they might go 3 feet up away from the couple in order to get the shot and to get that ring exchange. They'll be right up here. And I'll tell you right now, the photos will be better if you do that, if you physically move to the best possible location for the shot, versus if you try to get all your photos with a long zoom lens and stay way out of the way. There are limits to what you can actually grab. So you have to judge for yourself and kind of ask the question, will me being a distraction in this moment right now be worth me capturing this photo for them to have forever? And so for a lot of the ceremony, I find the answer is no. This is not going to make for one of those moments they're going to be like, wow, I'm so glad I have this photo. But sometimes the answer is, yeah, it actually would probably be more important to the couple to have this photo, even if it means for a second I cut off dad's view or a few of the guests can't see. So it really depends. You have to ask yourself that question. But the absolute key is that if you do step in front of somebody, is I always want to be very quick. I step in, I take my photo, and then I step out or I crouch down. So I'm not blocking anybody's view for a long time. I just think that's kind of rude and it's going to frustrate people, especially if they're important people from the day. And of course, if you have a second photographer, this is way easier because you stand on one side of the aisle, they can stand on the other or out to the side, and you don't have to worry about moving quite so much. And then you'll switch sides halfway through and go and get the other shot. Now, if you have two photographers, you might be saying, well, why? Why wouldn't you just have you on one side and them on the other side and you just stay that way the entire time? Well, it's because you both shoot slightly different. All of the photos of the bride will be of a certain style, and all of the photos of the groom will be of a certain style, and they won't perfectly match. And so it's better to switch halfway so that they get a nice even blend of photos of both of them, okay? So that's the vows. I get my shots, and then generally the ring shots are next. Now, rings are tricky because the only way to actually get a tiny ring in a photo is to either have a huge zoom lens or to get real up close and in their business. And so if you use a zoom lens, it's possible to get a decent ring shot if you're way up here in the front and you have a 150 mil. But I will say that most of the time the hands aren't even visible or in the right spot. And so it becomes impossible to photograph it anyways because the hand was covered, you couldn't even see the ring, it was only out for a split second. So I wouldn't worry so much about the actual ring exchange. You can always hack this later, get the couple to stand up front and just put the rings on and take that photo nice and close up, and it'll feel like you got it anyways. The actual part of the ring exchange that I think is most important and is so easy to forget is the ring handoff from whoever the ring bearer is. And one last little tip for the actual ring exchange is make sure that you give yourself enough room and have a wide enough lens that you can get photos of them and their expressions, because generally, compared to getting a close-up of a ring on a finger, it is going to be better to get that photo of them, just a full body shot or maybe a mid body shot, because what happens most of the time is either the groom or the bride, their finger is so sweaty, swollen, they can't get it on, and there's always going to be some kind of a laugh or a chuckle that you can grab as one of those nice little micro moments. So that, honestly, to me is a much better photo to plan for and to hope for than to try and get a close-up of a ring on a finger, because most of the time it doesn't really turn out. All right, so that's easy breezy. After that, we've just got a couple things. We've got the signing, then the kiss, then the exit. And the signing is generally super chill. You just want to get a photo of everybody. I don't take 500 photos of a pen writing on paper, but I will grab an individual photo of every individual who actually signs. And so you do have to ask them. Otherwise, they will just sign it and skip on out of there. You have to say, hey, give me a quick smile for the camera to each one of them and get one photo of them all together, and you're done. It's very easy, not a big deal. And during this time, I'm also watching out for moments both between the bride and groom because they're super excited. And so you'll get those nice little like super cuddly and affectionate moments if you're watching as they're standing there whispering to each other. And I'm also watching the guests and seeing what they're doing. We can find some nice candid moments. And right now is a good time for the second photographer to be able to roam around and get those photos of the guests without it being weird or for them to be distracting. So now it's time for everybody's favorite moment, which is the kiss. Now, we have some stuff to talk about, and this is because I shot a lot of weddings, and this moment is by far the easiest one to miss or mess up because of how inconsistent it is. So I'm going to give you my absolute superpower secrets here that have honestly made the hugest difference for me that I've kept to myself for years because of how effective they are. First, a great kiss photo happens before the kiss and before the ceremony. My first secret is that I actually talk to the bride and groom, either together during the first look or separately before the ceremony, and I say something like, hey guys, you're only getting married once. When you get that announcement and you get to go in and kiss your partner, remember to make it a good one. And they'll laugh, and I'll say, but seriously, when it comes to the photos, if you can make it a super long kiss, like a good 2-3 seconds, that's always super helpful. And then once you finish, if you want to cheer or fist bump or throw your hands up in the air, whatever it is that you want to do, this is your moment. So I just want to make sure that I actually capture all that joy for you. So just figure out what you want to do, make sure that kiss is long, and enjoy it, right? And so by doing this, setting the stage ahead of time, I ask them for that big 3 Mississippi kiss and for a cheer or a fist bump or whatever it is they want. Then I'm pre-framing what it is so that when the moment comes, they actually go for it and don't come back. That's how you get those cheering photos. If you want that photo, it does not happen by accident. You actually have to ask them to do it. As silly as that sounds. Like, I would say every single couple of the entire last season I did had a cheer photo. And that's because I had this talk every single time. You can't photograph a moment that never happens. So doing this makes sure that passionate kiss and that celebratory cheer actually happen in the first place. That's trick number 1. Trick number 2 is also part of the talk. So I'll let them know that as they're walking down the aisle, I actually would love it if you go for another kiss about halfway down. And then that way, if you want to give her a dip or whatever, I can absolutely do that and get a photo of you surrounded by the people that you love. And if the groom wants to, he can take her, give her a big dip kiss or whatever it is they want. So instead of one magic moment now, the one chance to get that nice kiss, I make 2. So I have a backup. If I miss the kiss, worst case scenario, I say, hey guys, go for another kiss as they're walking down the aisle. And this absolutely means that I've covered my butt and I have possibly 2 great moments. Now my third trick is a bit of a bold one that I know a lot of people are actually kind of uncomfortable with, but before the ceremony, when guests are sitting there waiting, I'll actually step in and introduce myself and say something like, hey guys, I'm Ryan the photographer. You're all looking so great and I'm super excited to celebrate the couple's name with you. I'm going to do my best to make sure you all look amazing. Now, if any of you want a photo at any point during the day, just come find me. And I just want to ask for one quick favor. When the bride and groom go in for their kiss, let's give them the biggest massive cheer so that they can hear us all the way across the lake, okay? And remember, my camera can see you, but it can't hear you. So when you're cheering, big smiles, hands in the air, let's really celebrate, yeah? So by having this talk, we're pre-framing, we're setting up for this moment. It's bold. You might hear that and say, holy crap, I could never in a million years do that. And if it's a wedding at a Catholic church with 300 guests, like obviously neither would I. But if the context makes sense, if it's a smaller wedding, it's outdoors, it's an elopement, whatever, there's 50 people there, it will actually make a big difference. And if you do it in a way that is friendly and upbeat and just introducing yourself and like being a human and treating people like they're your best friends, like you'd have no problem asking your friends to do a favor like that for you, right? It's only intimidating because it's strangers. So treat people like your friends. And people are actually going to appreciate and respect you for it because you're doing your job and you're doing a great job. Now, back to the actual real-life ceremony. I'll be standing near the middle of the aisle because I want to have enough room to get the kiss and also back up. And if I have a second photographer, they'll be wherever makes sense for a second shot. So it really does depend on the venue itself. And honestly, I'm a super huge fan of behind and off to the side of the couple a little bit, if the situation allows. So here's my second photographer. I would probably put her somewhere like over here-ish would be really nice if I could pull that off, and if she actually has the sight line to see the couple. Why? Because you're going to get the parents and the siblings and the grandparents in the background. Everybody's cheering, everybody's pumped. Like that is most of the time a way more interesting background to me and a way more meaningful photo than my photo that it's just going to be plants. So that is personally the few weddings that I'm able to do that, my preference. And sometimes I will actually do this even if I'm the only photographer. The only thing is you have to make sure you really hustle so that you can get the exit afterwards. So just know that in advance. If you want to catch the exit, you need to hustle to be able to do it. And that's the last of the ceremony. That exit photo is honestly one of the most requested shots that I get from couples, which is something I should probably talk about really quick because they go for the kiss and most of the time immediately they're going to do their exit. Now on my very first ever call with the couple before they book, I always actually ask them one question. Pretend the day is over and we're sitting here a year later and you've got a print on that wall behind you of your absolute favorite photo of the day. Like it's just one photo that sums up what that day meant for you. What does that photo look like? And more often than anything else, it's either them cheering as they exit down the aisle or they just got married, or it's some kind of candid party photo with their family at the reception. Now notice in both of those, it's an emotional moment. Literally like 90% of the time. So when I'm getting the exit shot, I always want to make sure that that moment happens. And the trick is honestly mostly in the preparation, just like with a kiss. I'm going to give them a little heads up and I'll let them know as they're coming down the aisle, I'll be there to grab photos. So I want them to hold hands. I want them to cheer. I want them to go for that dip. Whatever it is they want to do and is true for them, go for it. Just make sure you have a party and let me see that on the camera. And then during the actual moment, as they're walking down the aisle, I'll give them a little prompt, right? So I've got my camera and I'm like, woo, here we go, guys. Big cheer, right? It sounds cheesy. It sounds stupid as I'm doing it here, but it works. And so this will remind them and give them that cue, and that's it. I'm shooting in burst mode here because you do not want to miss this moment, having an amazing moment, but you just didn't get the shot because you only took 4 photos. And then I've got continuous autofocus on my camera, so I get at least a few great options, and generally, the wider you can shoot on this with a 35mm or even a 24mm, it's going to be better because you can always crop in later. And having that wide angle is going to make it much more likely that you can fit them in the frame, that everything is in focus. You can never crop out, and if it's out of focus, it's very hard to do anything about that, right? So once I get to the end of the aisle, I'm going to move me, I'm going to move the couple. I'm generally going to run over here, and I'll send my second photographer to actually watch the couple, because they're going to go off wherever they're going to go off, and they're going to have a nice moment and celebrate with their wedding party as they all arrive. And then I'll typically be getting photos of the wedding party as they come out. Now you could switch this if you think it's more important for you to go here and the second photographer to stay and get the photos of guests as they leave. But it's really up to you. The key is just make sure you're aware that generally these are pretty awesome moments. It's everybody celebrating and pumped and giving congratulations. You want to make sure you're watching that. This is where you can get some of the best candids from the day. And technically that's the end of the ceremony, but what I'm actually calling the last part of the ceremony is typically me getting ready for the big group photo, which is honestly a little bit the bane of my existence and the hardest part of the ceremony, because herding 100 or more hot and sweaty humans into an organized group where they all just want to grab a drink is a high energy activity. But here's the process of what I've found works best for me. First off, I want to plan it with the couple in advance so that they've already told the officiant that the officiant should announce that there is going to be a group photo should the guests please remain in their seats so the photographer can direct them where to go. I want them to do that. I also, if I can, get them to put that in the actual ceremony booklet so that it's written down twice in case the officiant actually forgets to mention it, okay? Second, I choose the spot before the ceremony starts, so I already know where I'm going to put everybody and where I'm going to stand. I want them facing away from the sun so they're not squinting, and I want to be higher than them so I can see everybody. Those are the two criteria. Facing away from the sun, and I want a place where I can get a little bit of height so I can have several rows and actually see everybody. Number 3, you want to plan out how many rows you want ahead of time, depending on how many guests you have. So if I have the room, I generally would go for 1 row, and then if I have no room for that, I do 2, and then so on. So generally, I want to have as few rows as possible. It just makes it a lot easier to coordinate everybody and see everybody. Taking a stepladder to the ceremony is honestly the easiest way to actually do this and make sure that no matter where you are, you can get a little extra height. And finally, number 4, if it's going to be a really big group, I'll actually fire up my drone and use the drone for the group photo. But I've had mixed results with this one, to be honest. If there's not enough light, it tends to be dark. It also takes a few more minutes for me to get it up and set up. So yeah, kind of mix and match. I think that the stepladder or having a small ladder is actually going to be the best method in terms of making it easy for you. But really, just figure it out in advance and have a plan. It's going to make it a lot easier. Now, number 5, I'll actually grab a couple guests and I'll get them to stand on each end of wherever I'm taking that group photo so that guests visually know exactly where they need to go. Hey, go in between these 2 people. Hey, 2 people, wave your hands. And then that way, everybody knows where they need to go and it's just a lot easier to communicate. And finally, tip number 6 is giving the guests good instructions. It's only awkward and weird if you are timid about this and kind of make it weird. You might be intimidated. You probably will in talking to such a big group, but I promise you it's going to be totally fine. Everybody else wants this over with just as much as you do, and they're all on the same side. So you want to be bold and confident and just tell people exactly what it is they need to know. So I'll start by saying, hey guys, my name's Ryan. I'm the photographer here today. We're going to take a group photo, and I know we all want to grab a drink and get into the shade, so I'm going to make this as fast as I possibly can. Is that okay? Everybody will say, yeah, they're all smiling. So what I need is everybody to make 2 rows, okay? You see these amazing people over here? They're the ends of the rows. So I need everybody here to move into those 2 rows in between those people, starting with our wedding party here in the middle and the grandparents and the parents right here up in front. And so it's really that easy. I've tried it a bunch of different ways, but generally, if you get the most important people in the front and center, then get everybody to fill in around them and the kids in the very front, that's the easiest way. Okay, then once everybody is in roughly where they need to go, I'll tell them, okay, now we get this one shot, all right? So if you can't see me, I can't see you. Anybody not sure if they can see me, and I'll adjust anybody who needs adjusting. Then I'll take those 10 to 15 photos looking straight at the camera. Then I'll ask them to do one with a cheer. And of course, I'm always going to make a joke like, hey, that was pretty weak. I mean, I get it for a funeral, but for this one, we're at a wedding. We're celebrating Dusty and Kate. Let's really hear it, blah, blah, blah. And then I'll take that photo. Now, you always want to make sure you take a whole bunch of them and then tell them exactly what it is they need to do next. So I would say, hey, you guys are so amazing. That looks great. Thank you so much. Now it's time to get that well-earned drink. If you're a family member, we're taking family photos right over there, and I'll direct everybody where they need to go. Everybody else, you can go and get a drink and relax. And if you ever want a photo during the day, just find me. Again, my name's Ryan. Okay? And that's it. That's the entire ceremony from start to finish. And kind of no matter what ceremony you're shooting and where you're shooting it, it's almost always going to be identical to that formula, unless it's a religious ceremony that has some different elements. And in that case, you just ask the couple ahead of time what you need to expect. But really, in terms of where you stand and what you do, now you're ready. So you've made it through the ceremony unscathed, you've yelled your throat raw organizing the big group photo, and now all that separates you from the fun, actually creative photos that you want to take are the family photos. And guests interrupting the couple to congratulate them and whatever other distractions and delays will inevitably turn your 2-hour photo shoot time into a solid 15 minutes of panic mode where you forget everything you planned on doing and instead you just kind of wing it and spray and pray and hope you get something half decent. So my goal here is to help you avoid that as much as possible, and if you're still stuck with only 15 minutes to actually take photos, give you some strategies and tricks I found have made the biggest difference in cramming 2 hours worth of photos into 3 or 4 Taylor Swift songs. So first off, success in the photo shoot is 2 things. 1, getting really great group photos of all the important family and wedding party, and 2, getting a handful of absolutely jaw-dropping, real emotion shots of the couple looking amazing and completely obsessed, over the moon, full of joy about the fact that, they just got married. So there are some big challenges that come along with that, but let's break it down by chatting first about the group photos, then couple shots. First, family photos. If you don't plan this ahead of time properly, you can easily take over an entire photo shoot time. So here are my tricks to avoid this as much as possible. First, I want to make sure the couple writes down an actual list of every single group combination in advance as part of my timeline questionnaire. I'll link to that template below if you want to grab it for yourself. Now, this is absolutely key because otherwise I'm going to be winging it and I might miss key people or take endless combinations of really repetitive groups that just takes forever. And so I can point this out ahead of time to the couple. I can also arrange the groups in a way that is going to be much more efficient in terms of the order we take those photos. Starting with the big groups and working my way down to the small groups, we'll do each side of the bride and groom's family. And I find that's generally the most efficient way. Second, I always ask the couple to designate someone in their wedding who knows most of the people by name, as that person can organize the groups for me and find these people, get them together and queued up and ready to just rock and roll the second I'm finished with the first group, okay? Preferably someone with a type A personality. The fastest way to get photos done is to have somebody else organizing the next group while I'm taking a photo of the current one. So if I have a second photographer, they can call out names and do this for me, and sometimes the wedding planner might help, but having someone who actually knows people by name is always very helpful. Third tip, I'm going to find a spot off to the side with good light, and good light generally, if I'm outside, is going to mean with them facing me and me facing the sun. I'm going to place my couple there where I need them so that they look amazing and get the dress set up the way it needs to look, and then have everybody else just come in and around them. The less I have to move the dress, the faster all of this is going to go, because every time the bride moves, you have to remove and replace the dress. And last of all, fourth, I'm going to make sure that whatever place I choose to take these photos is far enough away from the main guests that things aren't getting interrupted all the time and we don't have bonus photos that are kind of popping up. And that's somewhere I want to find that has the kind of lighting that will make editing easier for me later. I don't want to have lens flares because I'm shooting with, the sun right behind them. I don't want raccoon eyes because, they're squinting or the sun is kind of hitting them from the side or it's hitting some people and not others. I want to find nice, even lighting on everybody. Cool. So when it comes to actually posing people for the group photos, personally, I don't spend as much time as some photographers out there fine-tuning everything because I want to make these things fast and painless and just get everybody done so we can move on to the photos that artistically matter a little bit more to the couple. So generally, I'll just get the dudes to put hands in pockets just so that their hands are doing something. And then if they have a partner, they can put their arm around their partner and basically just have everybody turn in. And my instructions are just face the middle with your bodies, just turn in towards the center. And that generally is a pretty decent shot. And lastly, always grab at least 10 photos of every group because you will be amazed at some people's ability to have their eyes closed for 8 out of 10 of those photos. It's mind-boggling to me. And to make sure everyone looks flattering, you just need to take more photos. Now, once I get one nice looking one on the camera, I'll sometimes also get them to cheer or party or do something crazy depending on the vibe and how many groups we've actually got going through, because it's always nice to have a fun photo, and people generally, those are the ones they actually like and will look back on and choose if they have the choice. And so if I can crack a joke or make everybody laugh and grab that moment, that microsecond instead of a pose smile, it's always going to win out. With these tips and having someone organize your groups for me, generally most of the family photos I can have done in around like 15 minutes max, and then I can move on to the photo shoot. And if you're wondering about the lens choice that I'm using, 95% of the time I'm still just using my 35 to 150 for family portraits, and most of the time it's going to be on the 35 end. Some photographers really insist on using, say, a 50mm for portraits like this, but truthfully, I find that most of the time I actually need something wider to accommodate larger groups. I don't have enough room, and heavier people, in my experience, and for shorter people like myself, it's just more flattering having a slightly wider lens. It'll make them look taller slash not quite so compressed. So that's what I personally prefer. And last of all, the wider lens means everybody's going to be more in focus anyways. So I'm going to use my 35-150, and I'm generally going to stop down to f3.5, maybe even f4, and that way I just know that everybody's going to be in focus. Sweet! So that's family photos. Once they've wrapped up, I'm going to make sure the couple has a couple of minutes to actually have a drink and relax, because even though I want to take photos and I want to, let's go, let's do a bunch of stuff, if it's hot outside, I want them first and foremost to have a great experience and to keep them in a good state of mind. So if they haven't grabbed a drink, I'll go get one for them. And a real common mistake photographers can make is forgetting that it's not just your job to take great photos. You also want to take care of your couple. Make sure they're having a great time and enjoying the process. Plus, it also gives you a chance to grab some water or go to the bathroom or whatever you need to do to stay at your best. So, after that quick break, that's when we'll head off for the photo shoot, which for a lot of you is probably the piece of the day you're most uncertain about other than the ceremony. So let's talk about that. A great photo shoot comes down to really three key things: the lighting, the location / the composition, and the posing / direction you give the couple. That's it. You just need to figure out these three things, nail them, and you'll nail your photos. I've made every mistake there is to make when it comes to couples photos, so I'm going to try and save you all the hard lessons I've had to learn in order to create the system I use today. And first, a really quick word on the wedding party overall. If you can, have an actual prompt and activity for them, some kind of thing like lift him up for the Stanley Cup photo, and that is going to generally create much more of those candid, fun, amazing moments than if you just get them to smile at the camera and ask them to fake laugh. I'm not going to spend too much time on the group photo part of the photo shoot, but I will focus on how do we get great light, how do we get great compositions, and how do we get great at posing and prompting our couples. So first off, let's start with the lighting. Nothing is going to matter or make as much of an impact in the quality of your photos as the quality of the light. And most of the time, you're going to be taking photos at the exact worst time of day. That I also have another trick up my sleeve, which is I will, if at all possible, ask the couple in my questionnaire if they're okay with sneaking away during the reception for 15-20 minutes to take some sunset photos. And oftentimes, even though I do a full photo shoot during the day, it's those 15-20 minutes that I actually get the best photos from the day. So that's a little trick you can try. Sneak them away just after they've had dinner while everyone else is being served. That's the best way to make sure you fix the light in your photos. But if you don't have that option, let's talk about bad light and how to deal with it. So first off, I always have a circular polarizer on my camera's lens anytime I'm outside during the wedding day. And so I'm adjusting this constantly. You actually have to spin it to figure out which way it's going to kind of cancel out the glare the most. I can't necessarily control the light I have to work with, but I can cut down on the glare. And I can get dramatically better colors by having a polarizer on there. So I actually have this magnetic one. I've got a magnetic filter on all of my lenses, and I can just pop it onto whatever lens I'm using at the time. Second, I can't change the time of day, but I can change the direction that we're facing. And so if the location allows it, whether we're in the sun or in the shade, I can control that as well. And so if the lighting is super harsh, 90% of the time I'm going to be facing the couple away from the sun or getting them into open shade. Again, open shade is just shade that is not directly covered, but it's not in the direct sun. This makes sure that the light on their faces is even and they're not going to be squinting into my camera. And they get a little background separation with some backlight. If we're outside and the sun is behind them, that sun is going to just rim around them and we get a little bit of background separation, a little bit of glow. Now, even if it's an overcast day, or if we're in the shade of some trees, I'm still going to do my best to follow that rule and put the sun behind the couple and have them facing towards me. Why? Because even when it's overcast, and to your eyes, everything looks soft and cloudy, right? When I get home and I edit my photos, I am always amazed at how harsh that light is still going to look. This is super true when the sky is high overcast, not like low cloud. On a foggy day or a really rainy day with low clouds, then the light truly is going to be soft and beautiful, and you're lucky enough that then you can just shoot in whatever direction you want and not worry about it. But here's a trick that I kind of use to tell. Look for a nearby car and actually check for the shadow underneath it. On a bright sunny day, you'll actually get a super defined dark shadow under that car. If it's a high overcast day and you look under that car, you're still going to see that the shadow is pretty dark, which means the light is still pretty harsh. Now, on a very rainy or overcast day, if you look under that car and it's truly soft, the light outside, you're going to see there's almost no shadow whatsoever. So that's the trick to see how careful you need to be about where you're facing your couple. Now, as a simple and basic rule, that's pretty much it. I'm looking for the light and I'm facing my couple away from the sun, and if I can, I get them into some open shade. That's pretty much what I'm doing during the photo shoot. I'm then looking at, from those options, what the best background is that makes for the best composition and the best color. I've used outdoor flash, I've used reflectors and diffusers, I've tried a ton of different methods, but the problem is, the more gear I take with me on the photo shoot, the more I've got to use and set up, the less time I actually get to work with the couple, and the less variety I'm able to walk away with, and the more distracting it is for them. If it's just me and a camera, it's very easy to kind of have conversation and joke around and have them eventually forget the camera is there and just naturally interacting. However, if I have all this gear and flash and lights right beside them, it just becomes harder and harder and harder for them to actually be their authentic selves. So for me, my personal approach is less about spending 20 minutes getting one shot set up and more about getting the couple interacting and spending 5 minutes at this location, then 5 minutes at this location. So we get a lot more variety, both in their interactions and in the scenes. And they have a lot more fun in the process, which leads us into how that actually works. So let's talk about composition and location selection, because that truly is a lot more nuanced and tricky than my lighting setup is. When you create your Pinterest board of inspo photos for a photo shoot, most photographers make the mistake of not really looking closely enough at those elements of the photo. They think that if you just take a bunch of great posing ideas and they have those ideas to work with, it's just going to work. But what they don't notice is that those poses only really work and look the way they do because they are supported by all those other elements in the photo. The couple just happens to be perfectly proportioned in their height and their look, so that pose actually looks natural and works. The lighting just happens to be that perfect glowing sunset. And the background, of course, is absolutely stunning. So yeah, of course it's going to look good. Every detail in that photo is aligned. But if you make the mistake of just skipping to the pose without actually getting those other things dialed in, it's not going to work or look the way that you think it will. Trust me, I've been there, done that. That's where composition and selecting your location and background are so key. So on the actual wedding day, you don't get a lot of time to think about all this. And so my biggest tip for you would always be to practice and prepare as much as you can for the day in advance. You should go deep, not wide. Select just 10 of your favorite inspo photos and dissect everything you can about the background and the composition. Your goal is to obsess about every single tiny little micro detail so you can train your brain to start noticing this stuff on a deeper level without having to even consciously think about it. So you want to grab that first inspo photo and start taking actual notes. Bonus points if you do it on actual paper and write it down. So what lens do you think was used there? What colors and textures are in the background? And notice what isn't in the background. Is the background darker or lighter than the couple? Is the sun behind the couple or off to the side of the couple? Or is it low in the sky or high in the sky? Is the camera angle above or below or level with the couple? How about the framing? And then you want to look and be detailed about this. Don't just brush over it. How big is the couple in the frame? How much room is above their heads? Are they centered or are they off to the side? Did the photographer use the rule of thirds or did they totally ignore it and do something else? Is it a landscape photo or is it a portrait photo? And then you want to look for the faults in the photograph. Like if you were to be there again in that exact situation, what could have been better? What would you have done differently? So if you go ahead and you go through at this level of detail with 10 photos, I can almost guarantee you're going to start seeing things that you never actually noticed before. And most important, you'll start seeing patterns from photo to photo to photo. And so chances are the lighting is going to be pretty similar across all of them. The backgrounds that you're drawn to will all have similar qualities. The poses that you like tend to have these different patterns that repeat themselves. So after you've done this with 10 photos, you've written 10 recipes for what to look for when it comes to finding great light and composition. And the more you do of this, the more you actually train yourself to start noticing these things in real life so you can find them quickly and instinctively when you're out on the fly and you only have 15 minutes to just take the couple to one spot over there really quick. So back to the real life wedding day, generally, if the location is popular, I'll have already pulled some inspo photos from that spot ahead of time, so I know kind of the good spots that we need to head to. Even better, I'll have gone there before in person, so I can take my time, I can look around, and I know what I'm doing. And then I'll walk with the couple, and I'll get them chatting and laughing and just hanging out as we're doing this, because just chatting to them and hyping them up and giving them the game plan as we walk is important, because I want to get them interacting as we're getting to the spot and relaxed and smiling. And even as we're walking to that spot, obviously, I'm going to be leading the way and grabbing photos as we go, as we move from location to location. So I'll select the first spot we go to and have the couple face towards me and just warm up with some super basic portraits. Like most of the time, this is kind of the grandma shot that they print for grandma to put up on the fridge. I've gotten in trouble in the past for actually getting candid photos of the couple where they're laughing and they're smiling and they love each other, but they're not looking at the camera, and then they say, where's the photo of us just looking at the camera smiling? So now I always make sure to get at least one of those really quick, and I tell them, hey guys, this one's for grandma to put on her fridge, and smile for grandma. And so they'll often laugh or chuckle, and I get this nice kind of genuine smile, but they're also looking at the camera, which is going to be much better. Then I go to the main poses. And my main go-to poses are typically pretty simple. I'll do a lot of walking and holding hands, or having her hold his arm and talking to each other. I'll have them turn and face each other and hold hands, or have her wrap her arms as high as she can around his neck. And then the big thing I'll coach them on is just always be touching, always be interacting. They don't need to sit still for me. I actually want them to be, switching it up and moving around, because oftentimes it's those in-between moments, not the actual like cheesy pose itself, but like that in-between where, they're adjusting, they're moving, there's actually some action happening there. That makes the photo feel much more real and less posed. And so often the pose itself is not complicated. It's the nuance of the pose. Like an inch or so of moving a hand can make a big difference in whether it feels fake or whether it feels real. And so that's where you got to study this stuff. And of course, it's going to depend a little bit on the couple and what their energy is like, and what her shoes and her dress allows them to actually do, and how their bodies work together, and where we are in the world. So if the couple happens to both look like models and they're just naturally super happy and beaming and laughing and playing around, well, obviously you're not going to have to do much. Pretty much anything you shoot is going to look good, and they're just going to do it for you, which is part of my beef with Instagram and with Pinterest and with wedding workshops. Because if you have the perfect couple and they're absolutely gorgeous and they're in the perfect location and it's the perfect time of day that you're shooting, it's going to look amazing. It just will. But if the couple is average, like normal, and maybe she's a little taller than him, or one of them is much heavier than the other, and we're shooting in a side alley at 2 p.m. in the middle of July, and it's 100 degrees outside, and there's 15 minutes to take photos, well, that is actually going to be much more tough and a totally different situation. And so the question is, how do you still get great photos in those situations? And how do you pose couples who aren't supermodels? I'm going to get something out of the way here. I'm not pretending to be the grandmaster of posing, because to be honest, it's still a skill I continue to work on. But here are my top tips that I've found work pretty well for less than ideal situations. First, you want to prepare in advance and practice in advance. I've said it again and again. I need to say it one more time. It's likely you already know what the couple looks like together. So when you're selecting your ideas for posing, you want to find inspiration and ideas that actually show that particular body type if you can. This can be tricky because oftentimes there aren't many of those shots shared on Pinterest and on Instagram, but you might need to dig. Go through the portfolios and websites of photographers whose work you really love, and then see if there's anything on their website that has that similar kind of couple. Second, do the same exercise as you did with composition and with lighting with your posing. Please, trust me, it is going to make a big difference. Take those 5 to 10 photos you've chosen and break down everything, because posing works or breaks in the little details. It's not just getting the obvious stuff right, it's actually getting the stuff that nobody notices that will make it feel just a little bit off or perfect. And do it with more than 1 or 2 photos, because after you've done this with 10, you're going to start to notice patterns. And that is so much more important to learn the principles rather than the pose, because once you have principles, you can make up poses of your own. It's not practice makes perfect. That's not true. Perfect practice makes perfect. That's stage 1, is the preparation, mastering the art of noticing things. Just training your eyes to get good at seeing all those little details. That applies to every area of your photography. There's no one golden bullet that is going to make posing work for you. It's more like there's 100 silver BBs, 100 little details that if you get them all right, that makes the biggest difference and your images will completely transform. So that's how you get the posing figured out. But then comes the more important part, which is actually figuring out how you're going to engineer the emotion of the moment and get those expressions on the couple's face. Just visualize the couple is standing there right in front of you. You've got to tell them where to go, how to stand, what to do in order to get them to do that photo. So where would you start? Just go through that exercise. What would you say? How do you say it? And how do you get them actually interacting with each other? And most photographers never actually think about that at this level. They never get deep enough to actually write out step by step what they need to do and what they need to say. And so it's no wonder that during the photo shoot, you're kind of stumbling around and you're frustrated and you're unconfident because you've never done this before. No wonder you're not sure what you're doing. So take that first photo and practice it. Honestly, write out exactly what you would say to the couple step by step. That is going to be the most powerful thing for you. And then actually read it out loud, like several times. You're going to try doing it, reading it, and then try doing it without even reading it, but just looking at the photo. And then try it without even having the photo as a reference, but just by picturing what you want that couple to do. It will completely change the game for you. The problem is that most photographers will never actually do this. So yeah, it's a lot of work to do, but you only really need to learn this once, and then it's going to help you forever. That's my guide to actually getting good at posing. And because you might be wondering what to do when the couple is the same height, or the proportions aren't perfect, or they're not clearly model status, here's a few quick tips that I've actually found most helpful in those situations, which is most weddings. First off, oftentimes with the bride and groom, you'll have the bride slightly further away from the camera. And this will make her slightly more petite and him slightly larger, especially if you're shooting on, say, a 34 or 24. If you've got a couple who is the same height, and we're shooting on a slope, I would always just watch the slope so that I put the dude on the higher side so he's just a little bit taller. And likewise, if she's bigger than he is, I'd also get him to be facing more towards the camera and have her facing more towards him a little bit with her body and with her shoulders. This will naturally give the impression that he's a little bit more broad and she's a little bit more petite. Another height trick, if you kind of have a big difference in height but you're on a level ground, is just have her spread her feet apart by just a few more inches. You'll actually have her drop very slightly, and that can give you a little bit of extra height. Posing is an art, but it's also a skill. And just like learning to paint or learning to play the violin, there is nobody who becomes amazing as an artist without actually sitting down and practicing and studying. Regardless of how talented they naturally are, you still have to practice the violin to learn to play the violin. The same is true for posing and taking photos. But now you've actually got a system to go out and find the photographers whose work you really admire the most and truly study and learn and apply this for yourself. The same process applies to the wedding party photos. And generally, the wedding party is just going to be a couple of posed group photos, then getting the girls walking and laughing, and the boys walking and laughing, and everybody walking and laughing together. So nothing too complicated. I've also been experimenting with a couple of different prompts where we do a photo bomb of the bride and groom, where they're just, really classically posed and everybody comes in and photo bombs. That's super fun. Or having a full wedding exit tunnel where everybody is kind of hands up and we make a tunnel for the bride and groom to walk through and we hype them up as they walk. Both of these are super, super golden and so much more fun than just the basic stand there and smile or hey, walk and laugh. And both of these poses I got from that exact process of looking at amazing photos that I loved and saying, how would I reverse engineer this? So at this point, we've got the reception to go to, and then we've got some dancing, some speeches, and you're done for the wedding day. Then you just need to go home and edit and deliver those photos. So the reception can look a lot of different ways depending on whether it's inside or outside or what the venue is actually like. But I want to give you the basic kind of gist of how I approach reception photos so that you can basically make a setup for yourself regardless of what situation you encounter, okay? So first thing, when I get to the reception, is I want to take detail photos right away. This is really important because if I wait 10, 15 minutes, guests have come in, they've put water bottles on tables, purses over chairs, jackets on chairs, and it just becomes impossible to get a nice clean shot of the photo. So if I have a second photographer, I will actually send them ahead of time to the reception venue, or I'll go myself if it's important a few minutes early, and that way I can actually get these photos before all the guests come in. Second thing is, once I get there, I'm going to look for the best natural light, and I'm going to try and get the venue, if they can, to shut down any lights that are kind of offensive and getting in the way. I want to, if I can, shoot with all natural light. I will maybe put a flash on top of my camera and bounce it off the roof if the ceiling allows me to do that, just to have a little bit more light in the space. But generally, I'm looking for a window, and that's where I'm going to take my table shots and my placing shots and all of the detail shots for that room. Now, of course, you also want to make sure that you get a wide shot of the room that just shows the entire setup. And I want to do that actually from multiple angles, not just the most photogenic angle. The reason is because the venue and the wedding planner might actually want those other angles for their portfolio to be able to show clients more of a picture of how they set things up, even if it's not the most photogenic angle. The second thing is the couple themselves might have some detail in one direction that you can see only from this way that they care about. And so my general rule of thumb for what to photograph in terms of details is if the couple spent money and time and effort on it, I want to take a photo of that thing just so that they have it, even if it's not the most photogenic detail in the world that I might not share on my portfolio. And so I would go ahead and take a photo of every single thing that the couple is actually set up there, even if you're not sure. And while I'm doing this, I'm probably also going to be switching to a prime lens so I can get to the lowest possible ISO if the light is really bad. So my 35 to 150 works okay in a pinch because it goes down to f2 and I take off my polarizer because it's a little bit darker. But only if I'm shooting on that 35mm end. If I want to shoot with a 50mm, well then I need to switch. It's one of the few times that I might actually switch to a prime lens and put on my 50 or put on a 28mm 1.4 if I need it and I just need that wide shot of the room and it's super dark. Again, my advice for getting prepared is always going to be in the pre-production stage. So scope out the venue ahead of time, physically go there if you can, look at what other photographers have done in the past, and then reverse engineer your favorite detail shots so you can recreate them with confidence. The next part of the reception is the wedding party entry. When I first get to the venue, I'll start by taking note of the light and think about the best place where I should be to get the nice shot of everybody coming in. And obviously I can't change the physical doors they walk in through, but I can choose where I'm going to stand and what part of them walking through is probably going to be the spot I want to photograph. So generally, I'm going to be shooting with my 35 to 150, or even wider, say with a 28mm, because the tighter I go, the harder it is to take photos as the couple gets close to me, and the lower I can set my shutter speed and my aperture without actually risking things being out of focus and blurry and a total mess. The entry is kind of a mixed bag for whether it's easy to shoot or super tough, because most often they're coming in from outside of the door, which is super bright in that one area by the door and by the window, and then they walk away from the light towards this super dark room, which means that if I'm using natural light only, my exposure is going to be all over the place and change very, very quickly on them. So if I have a ceiling that isn't too high up in the room that I'm in, I'll often use bounce flash to light the room during the entry so I get a more consistent light no matter where I'm standing. Now, if you've never used bounce flash, literally you just point your camera flash straight up at the ceiling, and the ceiling then spreads the light out from this narrow, harsh little beam into a nice room-filling light. It's about the easiest form of flash to actually dial in when you have a flat ceiling or a ceiling that isn't too high up. So before the entry starts, it's really easy to test just by putting your flash on and adjusting the power up or down, and you'll take photos of guests as they're walking around until you find that sweet spot. Now, if there is no ceiling, which happens all the time, or if the ceiling is angled or it's way too high up, well then, most of the time, I'll just use natural light rather than deal with harsh flash. That's just me. I know lots of photographers handle that differently, but I'll stand a little bit further back in the room so that the natural light is going to be more consistent with the rest of the room and not change quite so quickly. And I'll crank the ISO up to maybe 3200 and my shutter down to 1/150. My aperture as wide as it gets. Now, this is risky, and I know I'm going to have to take lots of photos because many of them are going to be blurry with a shutter speed that low. And just like with our ceremony example, if you actually stand to the side so that people are walking past you this way instead of walking straight towards you, it is going to be easier to get photos that are both in focus and evenly lit. So that's another tip, is you can find somewhere where you're more shooting to the side than straight on. Cool, so that's the entry, and remember, although it's an important shot, it's not the shot. I've never had an entry shot that actually wound up being one of the top photos of the day, because most of the time, guests are going to stand up, they're going to get in the way, the lighting is going to be less than preferable, the room itself has something you can't control, so it's just not a very great composition. So do your best, but don't get absolutely stressed about this, because it's not going to help you out either doing that. That's our entry. The couple is now seated. Now's time for some games and maybe dinner, and I want to give you a couple important tips at this point. First, immediately after everybody has sat down at their table, that's the perfect time to actually go and get a big group photo of the entire wedding table, all cheering or toasting their wine. This is the only part of the evening that they'll all be seated, they'll probably all still be sober, and there's no ugly water bottles or purses or half-eaten food on the table. So grab it if you can, and the couple will actually appreciate that one shot. It's one that doesn't get mentioned often or shared on Instagram, but it's going to matter to them. Second, this is also your best shot to grab table photos of all the guests. So right after everybody's seated, again, food is on the table, nobody's in the bathroom, so this is honestly something I personally hate, but generally force myself to do anyways, because I know that the couple is really going to appreciate it, having photos of their guests. So this is a chance where if you haven't had time to get a photo of Uncle Jimmy or Auntie Susie during the day, and all of these people came a long way and spent a bunch of money to be there, I want to make sure that they have their photo taken and feel valued by the couple. So I'll go around to each table and take 2 group photos. So I'll say, hey guys, let me get a quick picture. And I'll take one from one side of the table, and then I'll take another from the other side of the table so that guests don't have to stand up. Because if you do get the guest to stand up, generally it takes a little bit longer. You can do that and get half the table to go up and in behind the seated half. Either is totally fine. And this can be a little bit intimidating, but again, people really appreciate it. And if you just go up with confidence and a smile on your face, they're going to appreciate it. It's only weird and uncomfortable if you make it weird, and it's really only in your head. I'll shoot those with a 35 or even with a 24 millimeter, and I'll use natural light if I can, or if I can't. I actually have this small little light that I will hand hold over top of my camera, just as high as I can to get some distance between it and the camera. It's okay that it looks like a kind of cheesy flash photo because it's more about the moment than it is about the composition. So if it's one big family style table or it's a smaller guest list, I'll sometimes do something different and I'll actually shoot a single photo, like a portrait of every guest there. And I'll just literally step and shimmy myself down the table, one person at a time, and I'll treat it like a kind of game. And the guests honestly get really into it. And so they make some hilarious faces and you get a ton of great candids of people laughing and having a good time. So cool. That's basically the whole thing. It takes me 10 or 15 minutes to do this while dinner is getting set. And in the last few minutes before we eat, I'm going to do what I can to get ready for the speeches. So depending on the room, that might mean I set up a flash on a stand by wherever the podium is, or I just use bounce flash on the ceiling, or best case scenario, I can shoot it with natural light. So artificial light is complicated, and I really can't do it justice just in a super quick overview like this, but I'll give you some of my top tips really quick. First would be set up your ambient natural light first. So set your camera settings to the natural light of the room. You want to get that looking kind of where you want it to be, as much as you possibly can. Now, if the podium that people are giving speeches from can be moved 3 feet to the left or to the right, and the light is way better in one of those places, and the background is way cleaner, then you want to check with the venue or the DJ and move it to the left or to the right. Like all these little things, just physically moving the podium and doing what you can to make the actual composition better in real life is going to make your job much easier as a photographer. And if the background behind the speaker has, say, an ugly exit sign behind it, same thing. I will try and move things around to make the best possible photo I can. Next, I hate shooting at anything above ISO 1600, especially when it gets dark outside, because the colors tend to get really, really nasty. Like it's way harder to get good skin tones if the ISO is high. So I will go to ISO 3200 in a pinch, but that's kind of my limit, at least on my Sony a7 IV. So once I've got those base settings set up, that's when I'm going to add light as needed. So most of the time, I'd rather light the side of the face of the speaker than light them from straight on. And so this will give a much more cinematic look, and I'll place my light on whatever side the natural light is already coming from, just in general. So I bring those two cheaper, newer lights, and I have batteries specifically set up, and these lights get set up for the speeches and for the dances because I personally would rather have some constant light than have flash for a couple of reasons. It's less distracting to the guests. And the second is it helps out the video guy and it also helps out everybody there, especially if it's in a room as a lower budget venue and no one can see the speaker because they're dark. So everybody sees better and everybody wins. That's kind of a win for me. Typically, I'll set one light to hit the side of the speaker and also the couple. And then the other light from the other side is going to kind of backlight the couple and hit the other side of the speaker, which gives me a bit of a light sandwich, if you will. But I'll say it again, if I have a choice, I won't set up lights at all. But I don't always get that lucky, and then I do need to add a little something. It's always the minimum of whatever I can get away with. So once I do have my light set up and my camera is ready to go with the settings I like, I'll generally try to get food right away at the same time as the wedding party. So if it's a buffet, this is super easy because I'll just follow them right away after they've gotten their food before the first table gets in line. And that's because if you want to finish eating before speeches start, you need to do it right away. So if it's your first wedding, you need to find your food right away or you won't get a chance to eat it. Now, if the meal is plated, you don't always have that control, but you can ask the venue, and depending on the manager, you may or may not get lucky with them bringing out your food early. That's why in my contract, in my 6 weeks out emails with the couple, I'll also mention that make sure I'm in the room with you to take photos of those important moments during mealtime, and also get my food served at the same time as you guys so that I can eat and not miss any of the important moments once speeches get started. Otherwise, I say I will need to step outside for a quick dinner break and I might miss some of the action. So just cover your butt. It is okay to step outside and take a quick break, but make sure the couple knows that and is warned in advance, or you might get an angry couple. So I'll get food, and then when the speeches start, it's go time. So for the speeches, I'm not after 100 photos of every speaker, but I do want at least one great shot of, a nice smile or a tear or something that's actually emotion and meaningful, if I can, of anybody who gets up to that mic. So Just like the ceremony, my big tip here is just finding the right angle and waiting for that perfect moment, that split second when you can look up from their notes and have a quick laugh or wipe away those tears. And I'm generally going to try and shoot a little bit wider, like a full body shot, because I can always crop that shot in. I can never take a close-up and zoom it out. And I've made that mistake in the past where I got way too tight, and it's like, well, that's great, but I would have liked to actually see the space and get a sense more of the environment and the situation and tell more of a story than just a headshot. So at the same time, keep your eyes up and look around the room as speeches are happening, because you also want to be watching for reactions and cool moments, both from the bride and groom and from the other guests who were there. For the most part, I am shooting on a 50mm for this part of the day if it's dark in the room, or I'll still have my 35 to 150 on if the light allows it. I don't want to be right up in their faces, so having a zoom where I can stand a little bit farther back is nice. And in general, again, my tip for you, I've seen many photographers who will stand right in the way the entire time. I like to crouch down and really only stand up in the moments I'm like, okay, this is a photo moment, rather than just being right in front of somebody for the entire time. I don't want to block anybody's view. A trick for those of you shooting with low shutter speed, the more stable you can get that lens, the sharper those photos are going to be. So I know a couple of photographers who will actually bring a tripod to the wedding for this reason, and they'll set that up and they will use the tripod. Personally, I just look for something to lean on. So if there's a wall or if there's a post in the room, sometimes even sitting down at an actual table and grabbing one of the seats and using my elbows, kind of like a tripod on the table, that can help me hold it even more still. And my last big tip, as a general rule, when it comes to speeches, overshoot. You never know how short that speech is going to be, so you might not have the chance to get a better shot later on. So those are my core tips when it comes to speeches. All right, so for cake cutting, I'm actually going to normally pick up my lights, and I'll have a light here, kind of facing at a 45-degree angle to the cake, and then another one on this side, same idea. Now, where am I going to go for this shot? Because the bride and the groom are going to be kind of here, they're going to cut the cake, right? I could take the photo from over here, and then I can shoot back towards them. Or, in a perfect scenario, if this table is pick-upable, I would actually move it off of the wall by a couple of feet, and I would stand behind here and shoot actually towards the room. There's a couple reasons for this. First, if I shoot in this direction, most of the time you won't have this beautiful cake set up. Like, obviously this would be a gorgeous photo, so it doesn't matter if this is the background. But most of the time this is up against a blank wall, and it's totally ugly and boring. So I want to actually stand behind and shoot towards the reception. So they'll have guests and tables and lights in the background, much more depth. It tends to be a much better photo. And either way, I kind of want to be on the other side of the cake from the couple. So if I'm here, I'm going to put them there. If I'm over here, I'm going to put them on this side. And now the nice part is no matter where I go and no matter where the couple goes, because I've got my lights on either corner, they're going to be backlit by one light and they're going to be side lit by the other. The basics for setting this up are his hands go on the knife, and then her hand goes on top of his hand, and then you just say, hey, go ahead and look at each other as they're cutting the cake. Another piece of advice is get them to feed the cake to each other at the same time. One, because it's an interesting challenge, so most of the time they're going to miss or, winds up having a hilarious laugh and you have this awesome moment. And two, because it looks kind of awkward having a photo of one person eating cake and the other person just standing there. So that would be my advice. It makes for a kind of hilarious and fun and real honest moment. So that's the biggest thing I want you to take out of all of this. All those amazing moments during the day that other photographers are capturing, I can't speak for them, but when it comes to all of my most favorite quote-unquote candid moments, they didn't happen by accident. They happened because I set the stage for that moment to happen. And so when you're preparing for the day, don't just think about your poses and the logistics and the gear. Try and actually think about how you can set up these kind of moments to give them room to happen. That's cake cutting in all of its glory, which is almost immediately followed by the first dances, which is so fun because you're already running around like a chicken with its head cut off trying to get everything set up in time, which is why you want to do your best during dinner time to be thinking about how you're going to set all of this up ahead of time so you aren't figuring it out on the fly. And another big tip, chat with the MC or with the DJ or whoever is announcing what's happening ahead of time and ask them just to give you a couple minutes between the cake cutting and the first dances for you to set up. They'll almost always be super cool with that, and it does help a lot. So first dances, where to start? Lens choice. Most of the time, I'm shooting on a 35 to 150. It lets me get some variety in focal length without actually having to switch lenses. Now, lighting is going to be, most of the time, my two video lights on each corner of the dance floor. And I'm actually going to do the same thing as I did with the cake cutting. I'm going to position myself on this side of the dance floor, shooting back towards all the guests over here who are going to be standing around the dance floor. Why? Because in general, the view in this direction towards an empty black wall or an empty space is going to be way less interesting than if I stand on this side. So that's my tip for you. Shoot back towards the guests, not with the guests. Once they come out, whether it's the couple or it's the father-daughter dances, it's all pretty much the same. I'm going to stay on this side of kind of the 180 so that no matter what, I've got one backlight on the couple and one nice side light on the couple. Now these lights, again, not absolutely critical. If you don't have lights, you just want to bounce flash, totally fine. You just want to have a couple of minutes to actually set things up and have a test shot. So if you have a second photographer, you can get them to stand in the middle of the dance floor and just test your settings. If you don't have a second photographer, you can maybe even grab the DJ or grab the planner. Just get somebody so that you have an idea of what your shot's going to look like before the actual moment, okay? That is my big piece of advice. And that's pretty much all there is to it. Just like with the speeches, I like to overshoot the dances because I know that finding the perfect moment where the expressions and the light and the angles all align, and it takes a lot of bad photos to actually get that one that you keep. And so finally after this point, you're at the end of the night when the rest of the dance is going to happen. The guests join the party. So I'll leave my lights, if I have them set up, for the first couple of songs, because that way I can take a few more dramatic shots with backlight on the guests. And I just find it's really helpful. There's a little more light for my lens and for my ISO settings. But then after that, I know the DJ is going to want me to take these things down. So I only keep them up for 5-10 minutes tops. And then I grab them because I know that as guests have more and more drinks, there's a high likelihood they're going to get knocked over or tripped on, so I don't want that. So I'll take those out of there. And then the rest of the evening is really where I'll switch to a prime lens if I don't already have one on. I'll put on a 28mm wide lens or a 50mm prime, and I'll just go around and roam through the crowd, generally holding this video light, and I'll just hold it up above the camera. And that allows me to get a little bit of spotlight on whoever I'm taking a photo of without being too distracting. And I do that instead of flash because I don't want to blind people. I know as a guest how annoying it is to get a flash straight in the face. So generally I'll do that. Now, depending on whether I use a wide lens or a telephoto lens, it really depends on how many guests there are on the dance floor. If I've got a dance floor that is super crowded, like tons of people, then using a wide angle lens is awesome because I can fit more people in there and it really captures the energy of the space. But oftentimes what you'll have is like this kind of mixed crowd. It's lackluster. There's only 10 people on the dance floor and it just looks weird with a wide angle. So I will switch to something like a 50mm because then it compresses the background a little bit and it can make it feel like the dance floor is actually more crowded. So which lens you use just depends on how you want those photos to feel and what the situation actually calls for. Now sometimes I will play around at this point with some shutter blur and setting my flash up, and you set a low shutter, you use flash, and then you move your camera intentionally, you make those blurry images and you get the light trails. But generally I try and limit that to like just a few photos because I don't want to blind a bunch of guests and make them frustrated. And the key part during this whole stage is actually following and watching the couple. Because generally at this point in the evening, the dude is just done and he's ready to like not dance and just have a drink with his guys, which is totally fine. I want to capture that if it happens. I also want to capture the bride who is almost always going to start partying with her girls. So I'll watch that, but I will also try my best to grab the groom and say, hey, can I just get 30 seconds, a minute of you dancing with your girl on the dance floor? Because those photos generally are a lot more fun and meaningful to the couple later on. And that's pretty much it. I don't need 500 photos of the dancing. I just need 20, 30 really good ones. But I probably will shoot 500 crappy photos at this stage because I just need to take a lot to have a few good ones. And once that time is finished and I feel like I've gotten enough, I'll find the couple and always thank them and give them a big hug and say goodnight and thank you so much, and do the same thing with all of the vendors. Find the vendors, make sure you actually take the time to say goodnight because it makes a difference if you're going to be working with them down the road. And that, my friends, is the wedding day. All right, so that was a monster of a process. It was super long, but I hope you got some value out of it and you're feeling like you know what to expect. And congratulations, you've made it through your first wedding. Now, let's talk a little bit about what happens once you actually get home so you know about the process for backing up and editing and workflow so that you can deliver those photos to your clients. So this is my post-wedding workflow, and I'm really excited to take you through this because when I started out in photography, delivering a wedding took me weeks, and I was doing so many things wrong because I didn't have a process in place that actually made this efficient. And if you find yourself taking on more and more jobs pretty quick, if you don't have the right workflow, you are going to find yourself swamped, losing files, losing track of things, and just really hating your life. So let me walk you through what I figured out that works for me. The first step is obviously going to be backing up your files, and the way that you do it and how you organize your files is going to make a big difference. So I'll show you my backup system. I have two hard drives I back my SD cards onto. So I've got a solid state drive drive, which is faster and lets me actually edit off of it when I plug it into my computer. And then I've got just a main backup hard drive. This is a 4 terabyte, just a cheap $100 hard drive that will back up the entire year's worth of photos. This is important because at the end of the year, I actually want to format this hard drive and use it for next year. And then this one will just sit in a box with all the hard drives from all the years I've been shooting, and they all get stored in one place, so I have a backup that I can always reference my old photos. So that's how that works. After these files have been navigated onto my hard drive, they get organized into a subfolder, whether it's a wedding or an engagement session or a family shoot. Each one has their own folder, and then the client's name and their date so that I know exactly who is next in my editing queue. And inside of each client folder, I have a exports folder for all of the delivered files. I have a Lightroom folder with their Lightroom catalog, and then I have all of the RAWs in one folder labeled RAWs. Pretty simple, pretty basic. The last step of the backup process after this has been done, the files are copied, is to double check the size of this folder. So I will actually right-click RAWs, go Get Info on a Mac, and that will allow me to check the file size of that folder and how many files are in it, and then I will double check that all of the files did transfer over from the SD card. That's really important because sometimes if that process gets interrupted, the computer won't warn you, but it won't actually get all of the files. And so you want to double check that before the last step of the backup stage, which is actually formatting your cards. I always format the cards after my files are backed up. The reason being, it's part of my process, and if I do it consistently the same way every time, I always know that my files have been backed up if the SD card is formatted, and if the SD card isn't formatted, I treat it as if it hasn't been backed up. I never want to lose files because I thought they were backed up, but they weren't. That's why this is actually part of the workflow. So that's my backup process, and guess what? I was putting stuff away before I recorded the sneak peeks, and I totally bashed my head. So if you're wondering what this is, that's what that's about. Anyways, we're going to talk about sneak peeks, because the next step after I've backed up my photos is to send those photos to the couple, at least a sneak preview. Now, there are a bunch of ways of treating sneak peeks. Some photographers do a rough edit real quick and then fire them off to the couple and then do their final edits later, and that's what I did for years. But what I've come to realize is this. Whatever you first send the couple is probably going to be the photos that they will share on their Instagram and that the guests will actually reshare and comment on and see, because everybody's excited right after the wedding about the event they just went to. Now, very rarely will the couple actually post their wedding photos a second time, and by the time they actually do, most of the time the guests don't care anymore. So my one and only chance to really wow everybody in terms of marketing my business and getting referrals is with the sneak peeks, which means I recommend taking your time and doing your final edits on those particular photos. Don't assume you're going to fix anything later. Now, at the same time, the big mistake that I have seen a lot of photographers make on sneak peeks is selecting way too many and spending way too long on them. You don't want this to be an all-day thing because you'll wind up creating a huge editing backlog for yourself, because it's almost like you're editing the same wedding twice if you do too many photos. So my tip would be limit yourself to your favorite absolute 10 to 15 stunner moments from the day. Don't overthink it. Ask yourself, if you were a total stranger looking at this wedding, which of these moments would you find the most beautiful, engaging, hilarious, or just, like the kind that would actually mean something to you, even if you didn't know anybody there? And for me, it's generally going to be a mix of those most emotional shots from the day, genuine laughs, beaming smiles, action shots that capture the energy, and maybe a couple lovey-dovey romantic, the artsy photos that I got to take during the photo shoot. My advice is show the work you want to do more of, because what you show and what you post is also what you are going to attract. And the kind of photos you show are the kind of photos that are going to draw that type of client. So the sneak peeks are for the bride and groom, but they're also what is going to market and grow my business. So I'm making sure I choose photos that are more based around my marketing and moments that might actually mean something to a stranger rather than just to the couple. So let's do this live together. I've got an app called Photo Mechanic on my computer that I like to use to cull my photos. And the reason is it's really fast for me to load the raw files, go in and scroll through and pick out my favorites. You can see how quickly they load even though I'm on full screen right now and recording a video. So I'm going to go ahead and just open up the grid view, and I'll sort these photos by capture time so I can see everything from the start to the finish of the day. And to make this tutorial a little faster, I only have about 1,000 photos in here. Normally I'd have 10,000 to skim through, but you'll get the point. I'm basically going to go through and just look for those wow moments. So I know that there's kind of a nice portrait of the groom here, but that's probably not going to mean much to a total stranger, right? Like, that's not going to have too much impact. What I'm looking for is the photos that are going to mean something, even if you have no idea what's going on and who these people are. So I'm going to probably skip the groom prep, the bride prep, and just go straight ahead to the first look. I might grab one at the first look as the groom is waiting and he sees his bride for the first time. Okay, that one's pretty nice. Might select that. That one's kind of out of focus, but it's maybe an artsy one. That's nice. That's nice. I'm basically just selecting ones that I think are probably going to look pretty nice. And then I'll go in and I'll just refine that later. So I'm not worried about like choosing the perfect 10 right now. I'm just worried about like doing a quick skim and seeing what's going to be nice. That would be nice. Perfect. So I've gone through really quick and you can see I've got here 31 photos. And some of these are looking kind of repetitive, so let's get rid of this one maybe. That one too. Perfect. I'll keep the group photo in there because everybody's going to be in it. And then I'll just have a couple of these dance photos and I think we'll be done. Now from there, I am going to make sure that I hide the ones I just got rid of. Grab these files and I'm going to right click them and I'm going to actually move their physical location on my hard drive here. So I'm going to go copy, select, move photos. And I'm going to put it in a new folder. And this one is going to be called Selects. So all the keepers I put in a folder called Selects. All of the other ones, I'm going to rename that folder Rejects so that I always know exactly which photos I've kept and which I haven't, and I can find those actual files. Very important to keep your photos actually organized. And I'm going to move the photos so that they're not just making a copy. Click Move. So then for the editing, I will grab those selects, I will drag them into Lightroom, get them imported. And I'll actually just do these ones manually, even though for the main edits of the wedding, I'm going to use Imagen AI to save a bunch of time, which we'll cover in a second. For these 10 to 15 photos, it's totally fine for me to go through, import them into Lightroom, and just edit them with my wedding presets, because I've actually spent years and years and years honing my colors and my settings to figure out what I like. And so it's actually gotten a little bit easier as time has gone on to find a look that actually I like and the colors are natural and get everything the way I want it dialed in. And so really what I'm going to do is apply a preset that I've created to fit as wide a range of wedding conditions as possible. And then I can go through and tweak each photo. So I'm finding the white balance and adjusting the whites and the blacks and the contrast and the stuff like that so that each photo is kind of singing, right? So I'm going to go through. That one looks pretty good. So I'll copy those settings and I could probably just paste these onto everything as a starting point. And so it's going to take some time doing this way, right? Which is why I'm using Imagen AI for the bulk of my editing, because Imagen will actually apply this preset look, and not only apply the preset, it will actually handle individual adjustments for every single photo for me. So it'll apply subject masking to make my subjects a little brighter, it will smooth their skin, it will widen their teeth, and do things that kind of save me hours of editing time for each and every wedding. So I'll show you that in a second, but for now, let me just show you both. So for the actual sneak peeks, we're going to go through here. I'm going to adjust the exposure, and I'm really just watching for things like the fact that our bride is much more in the light. So I'm going to have to make an adjustment layer and darken her down a little bit. Good, something like that. Looks pretty good. Here's before, here's after, if you're wondering. Keep going. There's the preset. Cool it down just a little bit. Maybe raise those highlights slightly for a little more pop and the exposure just a bit. I'm actually pretty happy there, except for the grandparents off to the side are slightly dark, so I'll just add a little radial filter just like that. So I'm not going to go through every photo individually in the sneak peeks because I'm going to do more of an in-depth editing dive after we import the photos from the main wedding. But that's basically my process. It's going through, applying my look, and then adjusting the white balance, and then things like skin. His skin in this photo is actually a lot more green and a lot darker than the bride, so I'll just make sure that I'm actually balancing that out so everything looks good before I post these photos. So that's the basic sneak peek process. Once these are exported, I will go ahead and send them to the couple with an email that says, hey, your wedding was so good. Thank you again. I can't wait for you to see all the finished photos. For now, I couldn't help myself. I had to go through and just send you a couple sneak peeks. You can check them out here. Feel free to tag me, tag your friends, and if you would be willing, it would mean the world to me if you have a second to write a quick Google review if you think I earned it. Otherwise, I will talk to you in 6 to 8 weeks when your wedding photos are finished. And then I'll send the photos. And I will also tag the vendors, obviously, and post the photos on my Instagram once the couple has had a chance to post the photos for themselves. I never want to post before they have had a chance to, okay? So that's the sneak peeks process. Now, let's talk about the next stage, which is actually starting the main edit, which begins with heading back into Photo Mechanic and actually deciding which photos we're going to deliver to the couple. if this is your first wedding and you've got 5,000 photos, you have to go through and decide which to keep and which not. It can be a little daunting, this part of the process. So let me give you some guardrails and a framework that I like to use. Now, first thing is I always cull in Photo Mechanic versus Lightroom or something else because I find it so much faster to go through and I'm not waiting for these individual photos to load. That's tip number one. Tip number two is always start by selecting which photos you'll keep, not which ones you'll get rid of. It sounds like kind of the same thing, but trust me, it's a big difference in terms of mindset and making decisions if you're scrolling through and you only select the ones that you want to keep rather than saying, which do I want to get rid of? Maybe I can get rid of that one. It'll be way faster for you, okay? So I'm going to go through here, and every photo that's a keeper, I'm going to just give it a 1. And you're going to see it adds a pink color down here. So I'll go through. If it's a good photo, I'm going to mark it as a 1. And so I'm going to go through. I'm going to select the ones that actually look good and that tell part of the story of the day. This was a gift. And again, I would never show this in a blog because to somebody else it doesn't mean anything. It's just him holding a box with messy hair. But to mom who gave him this gift, that moment will actually mean something. So that's why those photos are in there and kind of the mindset of what I select for the couple that I'm going to deliver to versus necessarily what a random stranger might like, right? So lighting the cigars, I thought that was kind of a fun moment. And then they all had a cigar on the deck. That's nice. And so the question is, how do you choose between, if you've got 5 of almost the same photo, which one do you actually go with? And my advice in general is just don't overthink it too much. Go with your gut. And on the first pass as you're culling, keep more than you need to, because then you'll do a second pass where you can actually decide. But at least if you narrow it down to say your top 3, it'll keep you from having to make that decision right away. And then maybe you can get moving a little bit faster. Another tip that a lot of people find helpful is actually cull the wedding in reverse. So what's kind of interesting is when you're taking photos with your camera, when you think about it, you normally stop after you think you've got the shot, right? So generally, the better photos tend to be at the end of that series of photos you took. So actually by culling in reverse, you can sometimes get to the good ones faster. And that can be just an easier tip, is generally the first one is the worst and the last one tends to be the best if you've got like a lot of duplicates. So you can go through, you can cull in reverse. I personally find this disorienting. I don't know why. I just like doing it forward to backward. And then I guess the last little tip I would give you is make sure, please, if you have multiple cameras or multiple shooters, that you are syncing up all of the capture times before you start culling. There's nothing worse than thinking you culled the whole wedding, only to realize that your second shooter's photos are now at the very bottom. And now you have to cull the whole wedding again because you guys have duplicates that you both kind of took and you're not sure which. And so what you would do is always check that beforehand, make sure you're sorting by capture time. And if you guys had different clock settings on your camera for what time it was, you just want to make sure by checking something like the kiss or the first look or a moment in time that you both would have had photos of, and you can compare the timestamp on those photos and then adjust one of the cameras so that they both match and all the photos line up in terms of the timeline of the day. So those are my tips for culling. Basically, my process is go through, select the ones that are, the first batch of keepers, and I'll be a little bit more generous with this first batch, this first pass. And so by the end of the first pass, I'm looking at having maybe 1,000, maybe even 1,500 photos that I've selected. And so the second pass is where I'm going to go from that many good photos down to maybe 500 or 600 great photos. And the second pass, I'll admit, is much more painful because now I have to decide between photos that are both good, but might not necessarily support the story as well together as they would just with one of them. And so this actually means getting rid of some of the photos that are good in order to make the overall story of the day actually have higher impact. Now remember, if you give your clients 10 good photos, but they're all almost exactly the same, their experience is actually going to be worse than if you gave them just one. Why? Because you're not going to know which one they actually like more, and they're going to have to sit there and try to decide. And that decision fatigue of actually going through and, I don't know which one I actually like. These all look identical. That's not something anybody likes. So think of yourself like an editor for a movie. They get handed hundreds of hours of footage, but often they'll cut out whole scenes because the overall story was actually stronger without some of those scenes. So a tip for this stage is actually zooming out and viewing the photos as thumbnails. This will give you a good idea of where there might be too much repetition and how balanced the day feels. For example, in this particular collection, I've got a lot of stuff of the groom getting ready at the bar, all that, but I don't have much of the bride and her bride preps. So I probably want to balance that out by either adding some more from the bride's bridal preps or getting rid of some of the groom preps. So that's one of those things you just want to be aware of, and you can only really see when you zoom out. And at a glance, it'll let you really easily see, oh, okay, I've got a lot of photos that look like this one right here. Maybe I need to narrow that down. So at this point, I'm going to fast forward, do my second pass of culling these photos and get it down to that kind of 400 to 600 mark. Then we'll move forward with editing in Imagen. Sweet, so I've got it down to 446. We're gonna call that close enough. I'm going to right click these photos, go copy, move, and do the exact same thing. I'm going to put it into the selects folder, go move photos, delete originals, and then go move. And then those photos are all going to get moved into this selects folder, which means that this raws folder only has the rejects at this point. So the photos that I didn't pick. So I'm actually going to rename it rejects. Now I've got my photos organized. All my files are exactly where I need them to be. Okay. Now, let's open up Imagen AI. And so what's great about Imagen since I started using it is my base edits actually get done a lot more quickly and automatically. It's taking care of things like the white balance and the contrast and the color. So I'll show you that now. I've got the photos inside of Lightroom. Now I can open up Imagen and create a new project. So I'll go, I want to edit, create a new editing project, and browse to where that Lightroom catalog is. And Imagen is going to say, hey, is this where the raw files are? And I'll say, yeah, that's them. So from there, I can go ahead and tell it, yeah, I'm editing a wedding, give it a name, and select what features I want to add. So Imagen will automatically handle your cropping, your straightening, smoothing skin, subject masking, teeth whitening, all these things. So you can browse and decide for yourself what you want to add. One thing to be aware of is the more of these layers you add, the more masks you're going to be adding to every single photo. And so it will slow down your editing time a little bit because you're going to have to wait for those masks to load if you're on a slower computer. But they can be very helpful features. I personally like to crop and straighten my photos by myself, but I will turn on skin smoothing, subject masking, and just so we can see how it works, let's try their new denoise feature. And what's kind of cool is they're always adding new features, and while they're in beta mode, typically they are free, and so you can actually add that to all your photos and it doesn't cost you a penny. All right, so let's go to choose an AI profile, and I've already got a profile here. Basically, Imagen has made this by learning from my past wedding edits. So I uploaded a bunch of previous Lightroom catalogs, and they went through and said, okay, this is how he likes to edit his photos. Let's make a profile based around that. So we will edit my photos to match my previous style, which is pretty cool. Or if you don't have a whole bunch of photos to upload, or you just want a new starting point without having to upload a bunch of past work, they do have a marketplace where you can purchase profiles from other photographers around the world who have uploaded their own edits and train the AI to edit like them. So that could be kind of a cool option you can check out. And if you like the looks of the edits that I've got, of course, my edits are available and you can buy my profile too to speed things up. So I will go back here. I'll select my AI profile. We'll just go with a clean and classic look today. I've got these features turned on that I want to edit, so I can click edit. So now what's happening? Well, the files are actually being uploaded in kind of a mini DNG file format, and they're being uploaded to the cloud for Imagen to look at and start editing. Now, they're encrypted, and they're also uploaded as a compressed DNG, which means it's actually only uploading a smaller file, not the full-sized raw file, so it won't take quite so long as you'd think. I feel like my internet speed is actually pretty average, and for me, it takes about 20 to 30 minutes to upload all of the photos for a wedding, and then maybe another 30 minutes to an hour or so before they're processed and they're actually ready to go and those edits can be downloaded. So either way, the editing time isn't super important to me because I can do some other work during this time. So I can check some emails, handle some contracts, do a little bit of marketing. Basically, Imagen frees me some time to be able to either take a break or focus on working on my business instead of in it. All right, so all those edits are done. Now I just download to review them and import them into Lightroom. So let's take a look and see what we got. So overall, you can see the exposure has kind of been handled. The white balance is roughly where it needs to be. Honestly, these are looking pretty good. If I show you before and after, let's go to develop. So we can look, here's before, here's after. So the exposure on these photos is looking pretty good. White balance is kind of dialed in. Here's before, here's after. Before, after. So it's applied my preset. It's done its best to figure out exactly where the exposure needs to be, the contrast needs to be, the basic settings are all dialed in with my consistent look across the entire wedding day. So I'll keep going. We'll scroll through here in the library view because it's a little bit faster to load. And you can get a sense of how these photos are looking. And I'll show you a few more before and afters. So here's before and here's after. So it's just taking those greens from being a little bit more warm and muddy and made them slightly more cool. And that's just the style that it's learned from. So I've edited several weddings in a similar style, shown them to Imagen, and Imagen now takes those colors and basically copies them. So again, before and after, you can see it's brightened it up. And if I actually go to my adjustment layers, you can see that it's added a smoothing skin mask, which I'll show you. It has been applied to his face. And then it's also added a subject mask, which is applied to both of these people in this photo, the bride and the groom, and it's just brightened them up a little bit. So you can see the difference that makes, just having them pop off the background a little. So now I can actually darken down the exposure, and they're actually going to pop off the background a lot better and just be that much more bright and smooth, and everything is working a lot more than had I just imported the raw files and started from scratch. So you can see here, everything is looking pretty good. There's a few photos here and there where the exposure needs some adjusting, the white balance maybe needs some fine tuning, but the point is, it's getting that kind of base look, that base edit is dialed in. So at this point, most of these photos are actually ready to go. I just need to do a pass where I go through and correct the ones that Imagen didn't totally nail, and then fine tune the images to the way that I really want them. So most of the time, that's going to be me focusing on fixing any issues with the skin tones or the color or tricky lighting situations. So you can see that between this photo and this one, we've got a bit of a color cast. This one is more magenta, and this one has more greens. So I'm going to have to go in here, add a little bit of magenta to the white balance, maybe drop the exposure a little bit. Somewhere around there is feeling pretty good. And I'm probably going to just add a little bit of a graduated filter, graduated, and just darken it down in that corner, just so that your focus is more on the couple in the center. And I could probably do the same thing up in the top, bit of a graduated filter. So I'm going to go through like that, right? And so here's before and here's after. Imagen's done a lot of the legwork for me. And then this next photo I'm going to want to match. So I'll take some of the magenta out of this one. Of course, Lightroom is a little bit struggling now that I'm recording this video at the same time as editing, but hopefully you get the point. There's before and after, and now we're looking a lot more consistent. And so maybe I'm doing stuff like that, adding some stylistic stuff like accentuating the odd lens flare, or in this case, I want to maybe make the foreground a little bit darker so that your focus, again, is more on the couple, because your eye is naturally drawn to the brightest part of the photo. And so by darkening this down, naturally your eyes know where to look a little bit more than before. So you can see the difference that Imagen has made, combined with a couple of edits on my end, and things are looking a lot better. So that's pretty much it. I'm going to go in, I'm going to adjust the crop and lens corrections if the photo is crooked or distorted, that kind of thing. And of course, once in a while, Imagen's not going to nail it. The exposure needs a little bit of a tweak. That's totally fine. This one, same thing. And so the more training you give it, the more edits it's working off of, the more it's going to learn your style. And for me, Imagen isn't really about replacing my editing. It's just speeding it up. So it's kind of like I had an assistant to go through and kind of do all the tedious stuff for me. And just like with a real person, that assistant wouldn't nail it all the time exactly the way that I want it. So my photos are like 75% of the way there. And like I say, the way to really see if it's right for you is just to test it out for yourself. So feel free to grab that link in the description, and it will give you 1,500 free edits so you can apply it to your own session and give it a try. So I've got my edits, and I'm going to go through, I'm going to adjust my images, and basically after I've gone through and I've adjusted my images to kind of where I want them to be, then I'm going to take a break, maybe get a drink or sleep on it before I publish anything, and I'll go through it one more time just to do some final touch-ups. So I will go through from the very beginning, and I'll start by actually making my grid view a little bit bigger, and I will actually edit in the grid view to start. And the reason I do this second pass in the, or final pass, I suppose, in the grid view is because it lets me see all these photos next to each other and see where the color inconsistencies might be. So you can see across these different photos, this one in the top right-hand corner, the white balance is just a little bit too warm compared to the rest. So I could go in here and cool it down. And of course, Lightroom is going to be really delayed, so it's hard for me to get this exactly right. But I can basically get these photos to play well together by looking at them in groups. It'll also give me an idea of where there might still be the odd photo that doesn't really blend, doesn't really belong. Maybe there's too many of a certain shot, and I didn't really notice it one at a time, but this way I can see it. And so I'll basically go through, and I'll just be glancing and looking for things that stand out to me. So in this case, I can see that this particular photo, I actually don't like the fact that the chairs aren't popping the way I'd like them to, basically. So I'm going to darken it way down, and I'm going to add an adjustment layer with the K key on my keyboard. And I'm just going to draw on these chairs up here in the foreground and also on the wedding arch. And I'm going to add some highlights to them and some whites to them so they brighten up. And then I'm going to do the same thing, but with a little bit less flow on these chairs in the back that are looking a little too dark. Okay, and maybe darken it, or sorry, add a little bit more exposure. Brighten this one spot that is still looking too dark. And now here's before and here's after. So just stuff like that, going through, and if it stands out to me, I want to go and fix it that one last time. So that's kind of my final pass, is going through in the grid view, and then I might even go through one more time by pressing E on my keyboard to go through in the loop view. And that's just going to be a little bit faster for me than if I were in the develop module and going through one photo at a time, because you can see there's a delay waiting for that photo to load between when I click and when it actually shows up. So I'll go through one last time, make sure everything is absolutely perfect before I publish, especially if it's nighttime, because I always want to give my eyes a break and walk away and come back so that I'm fresher, because it's so easy for your eyes to trick you when you get too deep into an editing session. And you come back the next day and you say, what the heck was I doing? Like, what was I thinking? That looks so weird. Trust me, that is normal. You are not alone. Just give yourself a break. And if you're really having trouble, try editing in Lightroom's reference view. So you can literally find one of the photographers whose work you really like, import it into your library, and then in the reference view, which you Shift R, there we go, and we can grab our reference photo. Let's say we wanted this one as our reference. We'd stick it up here on the reference side, and then as I go through and edit my photos, I can make sure that everything matches the look of that reference. So that can be a helpful thing if you're trying to emulate a certain style. And now as I scroll through and actually look at all of these photos, it is looking like overall Imagen is overexposing a lot of them. And so what you can do if you want to, you find your edits aren't exactly what you want them to be, and there's a change you can kind of make across the board, you can open up Imagen again, go up here and say edit again, and make whatever changes you want. So you can actually apply a different profile, you can adjust some of the tool settings, like how much smoothing skin you want to add or how much subject masking you want to add. We can say, hey, I actually don't want you to add too much exposure on the subjects, or I want you to brighten the subjects even more. Whatever it is that kind of you want to adjust, you can do that, and it's not going to charge you a second time to make those changes. All you have to do is hit edit, and it will go ahead and make a new edit for you to open up in Lightroom and hopefully solve that problem. So that's basically my editing process, and I'll go through and I'll actually show you a couple of edits just on some of the fun photos in case you wanted to see a little bit more of the hands-on of how I'm doing this. In general, I'm going to start by just looking at the photo overall, like the global changes that I need to make. Is the exposure where I want it? Is the white balance? And Imagen has pretty much nailed it. I might want a little bit more yellow in this particular photo, like it's a sunset, so I want it to feel like a sunset. So I'm actually going to go to the blue channel here in my tone curve and just take the center point down very slightly. And you're going to see as I do that, the whole image is going to get a lot more warm. So I'm going to exaggerate it and it looks gross. But I'm going to add just a little bit more yellow for slightly more warmth in this photo overall. And then I'm maybe going to go to the greens and do the same thing and just lower that midpoint, and that'll add a little bit magenta. So I've gone ahead and I've warmed up the tones overall. I'm going to darken it down and expose for the image as a whole. Not necessarily for the subjects, but for the background right now. I just want it to be a really nice sunset, maybe add a little bit more contrast to that hill in behind, and now I'm going to focus on the subjects. So next stage of this edit, I'm going to probably try taking the shadows and the blacks up just a bit, because they're definitely too dark. And then I can maybe add a little bit more contrast now that I've raised those shadows and those blacks and dropped the exposure slightly as well. So I probably keep things a little bit closer to this. My last change would maybe be adding just a bit of brightness with a radial filter around the couple. And the reason I'm going to do it like this, rather than add it specifically on the mask that is just on them, is if I added it just on them, it becomes really obvious that it's been edited. Whereas if I have a radial brush that is really feathered out, you don't necessarily notice that it's there. You just know that the couple is now nice and bright. So I can darken things down nicely, and here's before, and here's after. So that's probably the direction I would go with this one. I'm going to maybe copy those settings from the tone curve in case I need to use them again on one of these other sunset photos. Let's see what else we got. So this one is actually looking not too bad. I would maybe brighten it up a little bit. And again, I'm going to try the same similar thing. Take the highlights down and then maybe raise the blacks a little bit. And then lower the contrast. And then slightly cooler. And then lower the exposure overall. I probably keep it around there. So I want it to feel kind of like a nighttime shot. I don't want to push it too hard. And you can tell that you've pushed it too hard when you see stuff like this. There's kind of like some weird banding in the sky. So I am going to have to go just raise the highlights up a little bit until it blends. But here's before and here's after. And obviously most of this Imagen actually took care of for me. It's just me going through and kind of tweaking and finessing things the way I like them. So here's Imagen's edit. And I'm just going to paste that tone curve setting that I copied that added a little bit of sunset warmth and see if I like it better. Here's before and here's after. If I zoom in on the hill, not quite that far, but just a little bit, you'll see the difference it makes in the hills in the background. Just a little bit more warmth. I kind of like that. But the only problem is it does make the subjects slightly too warm. So I'm actually going to take the temperature on them down just a little bit. And then on the entire image, I'm going to take the temperature back up. So there's before and there's after. Maybe darken it just a little bit to get that kind of moody sunset vibe. Because sunsets are darker, right? So one trick that I would kind of, maybe a tip, not a trick, that I would say I'd recommend is try and think about how things look in real life. Don't expose something to look bright if naturally it was dark. It'll just feel weird and you'll be fighting it. Like you see how weird the skin gets as I get brighter and brighter. So probably around there is the most I want. And then I can drop my highlights, maybe raise up my blacks, lower my shadows. And I'm doing that instead of raising the shadows because typically I find that makes it look a little bit more realistic than if we raise the shadows too far. And I'll lower my exposure overall, somewhere around there. So here's before the raw image. Let me show you Imagen's edit, which was this. And here's the final edit right there. So just a little bit softer. Not very far from what Imagen got just automatically for me, which is pretty cool. So I'm not going to bore you too much with watching me edit an entire wedding. I have other tutorials for that, and if you want to watch me edit this one, just leave it in the comments below. Or if you have specific questions around editing, around using Imagen, leave those too. Otherwise, I think it's time to talk about actually publishing these photos, because the next step is publishing and delivering to the client. The software I use to publish my galleries, send those to clients, and also host my website is Pixieset. They kind of handle all of that for me, and I like it as a tool because it makes my life easier. So they actually have a Lightroom plugin here that lets me upload all of my edits without having to export them from Lightroom at all. So let me show you what I mean by that. I'm going to open up Pixieset, the plugin, and you can see that I've got all of my previous couple sessions. Well, I can go ahead, go in here and go create collection. And that's going to create a new kind of set that I can upload all of my photos into, a new gallery. So I'm going to call it test for tutorial. And I can choose a default setting. So I can actually, inside of Pixieset, create a previous, like a session template. So I have my wedding session template, which will automatically divide the day into the morning preps and the ceremony and the first look, all that stuff. And you can choose if you want to add a watermark. I always say no, because it's not my thing. And I'll create that set. And from there, you can see it's created all of these subfolders. So bride prep, ceremony, first look, that kind of thing. And I can grab these and say, okay, these are going to be part of the preps in the morning. So I'll just click and drag those over into the groom prep folder. And then I'll grab these next ones. Let's say this is part of the ceremony. So we'll grab these, we'll put those into the ceremony. Pretty much drag and drop. And once we've got that, I can click on this gallery. And you can see that at the very top here, it's going to say publish. So once I hit publish, Pixieset is automatically going to take all the photos inside of here that have not yet been uploaded to this gallery, and it's going to start exporting them and automatically uploading them so that it's just done for me. I don't have to, export them and then sort them and upload them somewhere else. It's just really simple and easy, and so that's why I like using it. And so if you want, there's a link for that too, which will give you some bonus storage if you want to try Pixieset for yourself. And like I say, what I like is that it makes life easier for me. So you can see inside of the back end of my Pixieset settings, I can actually go here and find the actual wedding we were working on over there. And so everything gets uploaded, all those images get synced to these different galleries, and then on the front end, this is what the client sees when it gets sent to them. And what's great is it gives them instructions, and it also lets them buy prints if they want to right inside of the gallery. And it looks great on mobile and on desktop. So versus using something like Dropbox, like Google Drive, I personally would recommend trying something like Pixieset because it makes life easier for you and it really just puts your best foot forward and showcases your photos in a way that looks professional. And the best part about all of this is if I'm scrolling through this gallery and I find that one of these photos is just a little bit too bright or too dark, or I need to make some kind of an adjustment, I can actually hop back into Lightroom and find that photo and make whatever adjustment it is that I need to make. So I can raise the exposure, I can add a mask, I can do whatever it is I need to do. I can do this and make it absolutely wonderful. And then I can just go to the Pixieset plugin, hit update settings, and it will automatically find any of the photos that I've adjusted and re-upload them and replace the old photo that was on the gallery. So once the gallery is good, I've gone through it, I've proofed it, everything is looking awesome. The last and kind of final stage is just using a pre-written email template where I message the clients with a link to their gallery, and then I send out the link to all the vendors as well who are part of the day so they can use the photos in their own marketing. And at the same time, I will set up a blog, and then I'll go into ChatGPT, and I've actually got a prompt that I use with ChatGPT, which you can grab. I'll leave a link below if you need it. But basically I say, write a blog for SEO about, and then I'll have the couple's name and the venue name and all the kind of important details you need if you want to create an SEO friendly blog post that is going to help you rank on Google. And so using that blog post, I literally just insert all of the information into the prompt, and it will give me all the text that I need to put in there. I paste that text up into my blog template, and then I'll go into Client Gallery, find the wedding that I was just using, select the photos from the day that I actually want to be included, and just like that, click upload, and those will be added to my blog post. And it just looks great. It loads quickly. Everything is taken care of, and it's super easy for me to do. And I've got a nice SEO optimized blog post. I go in here, change this one photo. Sweet. So the key here is not spending 3 hours to write a blog post, because then you'll never get around to writing your blog post. You want to have systems in your life and use tools that are going to speed things up for you. For you, it might be Pixieset, or it might be some other tool. And finally, if you want my all-time tip for actually getting referrals, if the wedding was absolutely amazing and you're super proud of it, order an album of these photos with the best photos of the day and of the venue, and drop it off at the venue the next time you're there, along with a handwritten thank you card and maybe even a box of chocolates. And first off, the venue manager will be blown away and super appreciate the gesture, but more importantly, and second, chances are they probably have almost nothing physical to show potential clients when they tour the venue. And so if your album just happens to be sitting on their desk and they have clients come in for a meeting, guess what they're going to tend to showcase? It's going to be your photos versus somebody else's. So that's one method you can use. And again, only do this if the wedding that you shot is a really great example of what the venue is capable of, because you got to think they want to show off their venue. That's mainly their priority. All right, so that's editing, that's delivery. That, my friend, marks the end of our journey together. It's been a long haul. It's been a good ride, I hope. If you made it this far, thanks for giving me the gift of your attention. I hope it's been helpful and given you at least one major aha you can take and apply to your next wedding. And if you're up for it, I'd love if you'd share that biggest takeaway in the comments below. And again, I'll leave all the links I can to all the resources and tools that I use in the description. And if you're interested in trying Imagen AI for yourself, you can absolutely grab that link, use it for 1,500 free edits. Until next time, create something awesome, and see you later. Peace.